Buenos días. En primer lugar, por cuestiones de logística, quiero informarles que esta sesión se va a grabar y, por tanto, se puede seguir después, posteriormente. Y también quería decirles que hay traducción simultánea. Como presidente de la Asamblea Parlamentaria de la OSCE, creo que hoy, que estamos en el Senado, es mi obligación de hablar en una de las lenguas cooficiales de este país, aunque, bueno, creo que el vicepresidente Maroto utilizará el inglés y, por tanto, me gustaría, en primer lugar, para ir directos al grano y antes de presentar a las ponentes, darle la palabra al vicepresidente del Senado para que introduzca esta sesión y, por tanto, querido Javier, te doy la palabra y luego le daré la palabra a los ponentes. Muchísimas gracias.
Okay, muchísimas gracias, Senador. Thank you so much. I'll give my speech in English because this is an international meeting. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Senate of Spain for this high-level session on public ethics, political integrity, and democratic governance. I would like to begin by extending a warm welcome to all participants, and in particular to our colleagues from the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, whose work in this field is both timely and highly valuable. Today's event brings together institutions, experts, and public representatives around an issue that lies at the heart of democratic integrity in politics. Public integrity is not an abstract concept. It is not simply a matter of international or internal rules, compliance procedures, or institutional language. At its core, it's about trust, trust between citizens and the representatives, trust in the fairness of political competition, trust in the idea that public office is a responsibility, not a privilege, and certainly not a private asset. In recent years, democracies across Europe and beyond have faced growing pressure. Citizens are more demanding, more skeptical, and often more frustrated. Political institutions are asked to deliver more under greater scrutiny and in public environments shaped by immediacy, polarization, and permanent exposure. In that context, ethical standards and integrity safeguards are no longer secondary matters. They are essential conditions for democracy legitimacy. That is why today's session is so important. We are here first to present your guide on public ethics and integrity, guidelines for political parties. This is especially relevant because political parties play a central role in democratic systems. They structure political debate, select leadership, connect institutions with society, and channel political pluralism. But precisely because of that role, they must also be held to high standards of conduct, transparency, and internal accountability. The study behind this guide, covering political parties from across the OSCE region, offers an important comparative perspective. It allows not only to identify good practices, but also to reflect honestly on the gaps that still exist, on the weaknesses of internal integrity mechanisms, and on the difficulty of turning formal commitments into a living political culture. That, in my view, is one of the key points. Integrity cannot be reduced to a document on a shelf. A code of conduct matters, of course. Internal rules matter. Oversight matters. Training matters. But integrity ultimately depends on political behavior, institutional example, and the willingness to accept that democratic responsibility begins inside our own organizations. This is particularly true for political parties. Parties are expected to defend democratic values in public, but they must also apply those values internally in how they govern themselves, how they choose candidates, how they manage conflicts of interest, how they respond to misconduct, and how they promote a culture of responsibility instead of one of impunity or silence. A second reason why this event matters is that it gives us the opportunity to move from diagnosis to discussion. The roundtable that will follow is devoted to the main challenges and opportunities involved in strengthening political integrity, and that is exactly the right approach, because this is not a debate with simple or automatic answers. How do we reinforce ethical standards without turning politics into a purely defensive exercise? How do we improve transparency while preserving the vitality of democratic competition? So integrity is one of the foundations on which democratic authority rests. Without it, public trust weakens, institutions lose credibility, and political life becomes more vulnerable to disaffection and manipulation. With it, democracy becomes stronger, more resilient, and more deserving of citizens' confidence. For that reason, I would like once again to thank you for your work, all participants, for your presence, and everyone involved in organizing this session. So I wish you a very, very productive and stimulating discussion. Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias, vicepresidente, y ahora me gustaría darle la palabra a Julia Netesova, que es la directora de la Oficina de Gobernanza y de Género en la Oficina de ODIHR, de Derechos Humanos de la OSCE, que por cierto con la que la Asamblea Parlamentaria de la OSCE colabora de una forma estrecha y permanente, y es interesante que ella también esté a cargo de los temas de género. El vicepresidente Maroto hablaba del political behavior, y nosotros como observadores electorales en 57 países que son de la región OSCE, lo que sí estamos viendo, Julia, antes de darte la palabra, y así aprovecho para hablar de political behavior, es un retroceso bastante evidente de las listas paritarias en muchos de los procesos electorales, y es uno de los elementos que la oficina de ODIHR, en cada una de las observaciones electorales, además me alegra que esté aquí Pablo Hispán, que ha estado compartiendo con la OSCE la misión en Hungría, y es uno de los elementos que también se produce en Hungría, también la ausencia de esa paridad. Por tanto, Julia, muchísimas gracias por estar en el Senado, muchísimas gracias por este informe y, por supuesto, le damos la palabra y luego espero que en la mesa redonda podamos ahondar en ese tema. Por tanto, muchas gracias y te doy la palabra, Julia.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction. Muchas gracias. Buenos días, colleagues. Dear First Deputy Speaker Maroto, Your Excellencies, dear esteemed representatives of Senate and Congress, distinguished political party representatives, experts, guests, and friends of integrity in politics. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights to this very unique briefing on Public Ethics and Integrity Toolkit. You are the first people who will see the unique research and unique guidance that was collected over maybe, Nini, 3 years or so? Yes? It took quite some time, so we are very excited to be presenting this to you. At the outset, I would like to, of course, express our sincere gratitude to our generous host, to the Speaker of the Senate, Pedro Royan, and Vice Speaker, of course, Mr. Javier Maroto, for your generous support. Thank you so much, and commitment to this initiative. I would also like to acknowledge the excellent cooperation with the International Relations Unit. Thank you so much to the head, Ignacio Navarro, as well as to Rosa Orozco, and to all the colleagues who worked today to make this happen. I'm also particularly pleased to have with us today President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Senador Pere Juan Pons San Pietro. We are really delighted to have you with us. Thank you for your moderation, in addition to non-stop amazing collaboration that we have with your institution, with both administrative and political side. So thank you so much. At ODIHR, we recognize political parties as the cornerstone of democratic system. They are an important channel between the citizens and the institutions, as you all know here. Hence, the quality of the political parties, the standards and the processes that they adhere to are as important as the processes and standards of the parliaments, where the candidates of those political parties end up being elected to and representing the whole nation with dignity. As mentioned already today by Deputy Speaker, integrity is not simply a technical standard. It is really fundamental to the credibility and resilience of democratic institutions. Colleagues today were referencing Hungary, and we can see that the work on democracy requires everyday effort. Democracy is our critical infrastructure today. It cannot be passive. Like anything in life, such as fitness level, family relations, in order to maintain them, you need to work on them. You need to invest time, effort, and passion to maintain all of that. The same is with integrity. It's a system that lives every day through our actions and the choices that we make. So in order to understand what is it that is happening with the political parties, we did a very extensive research. We looked into 90 political parties in 25 countries. So not all OSCE countries, we have 56 of them, plus Vatican. But I think it's a good start, and it gave us a very solid idea of what is happening with the political parties today. What are the dilemmas they're facing, and what are the solutions they're putting forward? So it allowed us to assess, let's say, the health of the democracy of the political party segment of our countries. And a few takeaways that you will, of course, see, they will be presented later, but I will allow myself to say that we see that the internal climate of political parties that is established through also such tools as code of conduct, it has a direct impact on representativeness in democratic politics. When people make a choice, especially young generation, they do evaluate political parties. Will it be safe for me to join? Will not only values that the political party has, but also what will it be for me to inhibit this role in this political party? And when they know that there are standards in terms of behavior, when there are processes, when there is accountability, it really energizes so many people across different groups. We also see that, of course, those efforts help prevent corruption and help also adjudicate cases. And we all know that different cases happen all over OSCE region, but what is the most upsetting to voters is when nothing happens, because there is no mechanism. Or when it is a system, it's not an individual failure, but when there was no process. Many people wanted to do something, but there was no channel where to use or to go to. So this is why it's important. And the third, of course, is an important gendered aspect of integrity. Senator San Pietro already mentioned that I do work on gender equality in political life, and we do see a very gendered aspect to this, that women in political life have to go through very different reality than men, and this is why the code of conduct today also needs to take into account behavior issues. And this is what will also be presented today. So, dear colleagues, in order to set the stage, I would like also to thank our experts. Out of 3 experts, we have 2 of them today, Fernando Casalbertoa and Luis de Souza. Thank you so much for being here with us. There was also one more, Lolita Tsigane. She's not here with us because she's deployed to Ukraine with the EU mission. I would like to thank you for your excellent work and contribution to this important field. And today's discussion will give us an opportunity to reflect on overall state. So this is not a Spain-specific event. We're not looking into Spain specifically, even though Spain is so far the only country in the OSCE region that has legally mandatory codes of conduct for political parties. So you are, in a way, a pioneer country because you said, well, this needs to be regulated through the law and it's mandatory. We will talk about different other countries and different other practices. However, we would love to continue discussion then with the representatives of Spanish political parties as well, to see what can we do to support your efforts in enhancing your internal party integrity and standards of ethical behavior. Thank you so much. Enjoy today's event. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Julia, por tus palabras. Y antes de pasar un poco a la presentación del documento, simplemente me gustaría añadir que es interesante que se haya hecho este estudio. España es un referente, pero también lo que es interesante es que se haga en este contexto de la OSCE, que al final es un conjunto de 57 países, y como hablabas de las observaciones electorales, en los que podemos observar desde la situación política en Estados Unidos, como país miembro de la Organización de Seguridad y Cooperación en Europa, hasta la situación que puede haber en Mongolia, también país miembro, participante, perdón, y por supuesto otros países desde Moldavia, desde Georgia, precisamente, Hungría, países de la Unión Europea, Canadá, Turquía, etcétera. Por tanto, creo que esa idea de cómo es ese comportamiento, como decía el vicepresidente Maroto, el political behavior. Creo que es interesante verlo en este aspecto tan amplio de una región que abarca más de 1.000 millones de ciudadanos y de ciudadanas y, por lo tanto, creo que el documento que habéis preparado es muy relevante. Por supuesto que aquí creo que están representados la mayoría de los partidos del arco parlamentario, no todos, pero la mayoría, y, por supuesto, seguiremos trabajando con la oficina de la ODIHR en este documento y, sobre todo, en su implementación y las buenas prácticas y la compartición o compartimentación de ese documento. Por tanto, muchas gracias, Julia, muchas gracias al vicepresidente Maroto, y ahora damos, diríamos, por cerrada las presentaciones y vamos al fondo, y nosotros, tanto el vicepresidente como yo, vamos a retirarnos de la mesa y vosotros vais a ser los que vais a presentar el documento. Muchísimas gracias a todos los que habéis estado aquí esta mañana y gracias, vicepresidente, también. Muchas gracias.
So, dear colleagues, thank you so much for the opening remarks, dear President Maroto and Julia. So now we are moving to the actual toolkit and the presentation of the study that we have conducted with my dear colleague and expert, Fernando Casalbertoa. And this toolkit is a very practical, step-by-step guideline support for political parties, how to either develop code of conduct and integrity system or how to amend the existing integrity mechanism. So, dear colleagues, I will pass the floor to Fernando. Thank you.
Hola, muy buenas. Por deferencia a mis colegas de OSCE voy a hacer la presentación en inglés, pero después podemos claramente charlar en español sin problema. El documento o la presentación de hoy básicamente tiene dos objetivos, ¿no? The first one is to present ODIHR mapping of 90 political parties across the OSCE region, which I will be taking care of, and then I will leave the floor to my dear colleague Nini Chanturia from OSCE ODIHR to present the toolkit on public ethics and integrity. The first thing I would like to show is it was mentioned before by our colleague Julia. This is a study that with Lolita Zigane and Luis de Sousa, we undertook at the end of mostly 2022, included 90 political parties in 25 OSCE countries. We conducted a survey study first, and then we had, of course, a more qualitative type of study with in-depth interviews with 21 party officials in 18 different countries. I'm sure that you might be extremely interested. We were taking into consideration 5 different political parties in Spain at the time: Partido Popular, PSOE, Podemos, Vox, and at the time, Ciudadanos. Okay. So you can see in this slide, the countries that we were looking at and the number of parties per country that we were examining. So I mentioned already, we use a mixed methods typology framework with quantitative and qualitative studies. When we look at the content of the codes of conduct, we can say that the content varies across political parties. Some codes of conduct are focused more on prevention, exposure, and mitigation of risk of financial impropriety of office holders. Others offer more a maximalist account of political integrity and prescribe a series of behaviors and practices in public life that apply beyond the discharge of duties and responsibilities. Could be, for example, bullying, sexual and other types of harassment, unlawful discrimination, etc. As it can be observed in the slide, most survey party codes of conduct include provisions dealing with discrimination of any sort, 23.3%, followed by harassment, hate speech, violence, sexual harassment, and bullying. It's important to note, though, that very few parties, for example, the People's Party of Spain is a positive example in this case, include written prescribed procedures dealing with online harassment and abuse. As a matter of fact, only in the United Kingdom and in Canada, with the exception of the Bloc Québécois, all political parties have these positions. Most code of conducts are focused on the behavior or practices of internal members, then followed by officials, not very far, as you can see in the slide. 25.6% of those code of conducts focus on candidates and representatives. Only 3.3% of the available code of conducts cover what we call third parties who interact on a regular basis with parties, like could be suppliers, PR firms, law firms, lobbyists, journalists, etc., etc. Party codes of conduct not only prescribe and proscribe actions and behaviors to party representatives, officials and members, they also address, as I was mentioning, these third parties with whom they interact. And for example, you can see that 18.9% of the code of conducts, also include, interactions with minorities, with political adversaries, with civil society organizations, public officials, and only 4.4% of the codes of conduct, include media. Most party statutes do not have disqualification rules for the candidates. This is very interesting. Only less than a quarter of all surveyed parties that have codes of conduct disqualify individuals convicted of a criminal offence. You can see there 22.2%. Although addressing discrimination and minority rights is a major concern to most party code of conducts, only very few, 5.6%, consider that acts of discrimination offer sufficient grounds for preventing wrongdoers from standing as candidates. In most parties, vetting of candidates is dealt with by conventional governing bodies, the executive body in the 34.4% of the cases, the president 6.7%, the interdisciplinary body again 6.7%, and only for 1% a Congress and Secretary General 1.1%. In some parties, however, new internal ethic management bodies, I will be talking a bit later on about it, 2.2%, are responsible for vetting candidates. In various countries, 31.1%, electoral bodies and other entities also have their own procedures and instruments to check whether candidates have no restrictions to stand for elections. And these are, the four, different bodies that we study within, codes of conduct. We were looking, of course, at disciplinary committees, ethic management bodies, procurement bodies, which you will see, are not so much, regulated, and final, financial oversight. So I will be talking about them in turn. So whether imposed by law or as an internal initiative, most parties, to the point that 88% of the parties have established disciplinary bodies alongside with party executive and deliberative bodies as key components of their intra-organizational governments. In 15 out of the 25 surveyed countries, you can see it in the slide, all parties have bodies responsible for disciplinary matters or dispute resolution. Those disciplinary bodies are generally responsible for managing and resolving internal conflicts and secure the organization's normal function in accordance with internal statutes and applicable legislation. Not surprisingly, of course, the issues addressed by the internal disciplinary bodies tend to focus on statutory violations, 77%, followed by member roles, incompatibilities and internal electoral disputes. Although less frequent, internal disciplinary bodies also address unethical conduct in 31% of the cases, inappropriate conduct that dishonor the party, 29%, and illegal conduct of a political or other nature involving their members, officials and representatives. The institutionalization of political ethics within party organizations is not restricted to the adoption of codes of conduct. Although party leaders often make public statements that ethical behavior is important, to their party organization and expected from all the members, only very few have invested the necessary resources to put in place an ethics body responsible for overseeing and enforcing standards of conduct to party members, officials and representatives, and for developing a culture of integrity within their party organization. All in all, in summary, almost 3/5 of the parties that we were analyzing have a body for internal ethic management. Not surprisingly, and with the exception of Canada, the countries with the higher numbers, of course, of such parties are EU member or candidate states. Poland tops the ranking with 5 out of 6 parties that we survey, followed by Spain and Italy with 4, and later followed by other countries like Bulgaria, Croatia, Latvia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Slovenia and the UK with 3. Where these bodies have been established, members, whose number usually fluctuates between, for example, 2 in the Liberal Party of Canada and 25 in the British Labour Party, you can have an OSCE average of around 7. So members tend to be appointed by the most representative of all internal governance bodies, the party congress, or equivalent, 50%. Only in a few cases have these been appointed by the party executive, 13%, or the party president leader, just in 1% of the cases. In those parties with internal ethic management body, disciplinary proceedings, clearly regulated in most, in 2/3 of the cases, in fact, party institutes, are treated as in-house matter. These disciplinary proceedings are initiated upon receipt of an internal member complaint in 60% of the cases, ex officio, or of course in its own initiative, in 52% of the cases, and after a request by another internal body, exactly the same percentage, 52% of the cases. External complaints of sources of information only play, as you can see, a very marginal role, 11%, in initiating these disciplinary proceedings. Disciplinary proceedings within party organizations tend to follow a rational model of attribution and punishment based on 2 rule of law principles, namely, the disciplinary action must be progressive and the sanctions must be proportional with the seriousness of the wrongdoing. As you can see in the slide that is displayed in the figure, most disciplinary frameworks include, in a decreasing order of frequency, ejection in 88% of the cases as a possible outcome, followed by temporary suspension, 52% of the cases, formal warning, 50%, admonishment, 23%, and withdrawal of endorsement only in 10% of the cases. With fewer exceptions, which are often associated with party purges whose proceedings tend to be open to internal and sometimes external audiences, most disciplinary proceedings tend to be managed skillfully, swiftly, and discreetly, to the point that in only 12% of the cases that we examine, disciplinary decisions were made public. 12% of the cases. Moreover, not only are disciplinary proceedings often treated as in-house matters, but as can be observed in the figure, decisions are also made announced discreetly using mostly internal communications, only 14% of the cases. So contrary to the idea that ethics disciplinary committees ought to formally communicate their decisions to members and external stakeholders to reaffirm the organization's commitment to ethical principles in conducting business, neither publication on party websites, 2%, press releases, 1%, nor official statements, again 1%, are preferred outlets for announcing final disciplinary decisions. The right of appeal against a decision by a disciplinary body is standard rule of law principle. Still, in only 34.4% of the parties that we surveyed were decisions subject to review by other bodies. In 6 countries, Albania, Armenia, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Poland and the United States, no parties were found with such review procedures. And the appeal stage involves a review of the decision, the disciplinary process that led to such a decision, or in some cases, a complete rehearsing of the case. In general, grounds of appeal might include disciplinary procedures not followed properly, unreasonable or insufficiently justified decisions, new material evidence brought forward by the defendant, bias or opinion bias of the disciplinary body during the proceedings, and disproportionate penalty. In most cases, as you can see in the figure, disciplinary actions are not subject to review, to the point that in 58% of the cases this is so, and where decisions by a disciplinary body are subject to review, this can be appealed to the party Congress in 26% of the cases, or the party executive, only in 9% of the cases. Although most discussions about corruption related to public procurement take place in the sphere of government, similar issues, we shouldn't forget, are faced in private to private contractual relationships, including the award of contracts by political parties within the remit of their activities. Some parties have allocated internal procurement committees to control contractual process and mitigate potential integrity risks. Some of these initiatives are part of wider compliance policies which political parties are legally compelled to adopt. Unfortunately, information collected on this issue is very scarce and does not differentiate between parties that have adopted these institutional mechanisms by their own initiative or as a legal requisite. Only six of the 90 parties that we studied have internal procurement committees, especially dedicated to the review and oversight of awarding of contracts to vendors. In the case of Spain, Ciudadanos had, with 7 members, none of them part of the party executive. The People's Party has, and Vox have, both with 5 members. In most cases, selected and appointed by specifically regulated methods, they are selected by appointed by specifically regulated methods, while the party executive usually is in charge of their selection. Only in the case of Vox, here in Spain, does the Secretary General plays a role, along with the executive and the Congress. Internal procurement committees can either act as officio, like in the case of Vox, for example, here in Spain, or upon the request of another internal party organ, like in the case of the People's Party. While there is no obligation to report whatsoever in half of the cases, the activity decisions of these internal procurement committees in 3 parties, like the People's Party, are reported to the party executive. Only in the latter, the People's Party, is the internal procurement committee obliged to publish their decisions. Yes. Following the insistence of many organizations, including ours, ODIHR, but also the Venice Commission, Greco, party funding regulation has, of course, been requirement for political parties all over the OSCE community. Corruption scandals at the core of most political finance legislative reforms, we know, are ubiquitous, taking place in every single country. Parties have been heavily punished for high-profile corruption cases, to the point in some cases of losing power. It's not surprising, therefore, that up to almost 79% of the parties that we study have internal financial oversight committees. In fact, as you can see in the figure, this is the case for all parties examined in up to 15 of the countries that we included in our study. Only in Spain and Italy, 2 of the countries most affected by these scandals, is the number of parties with internal financial oversight committees higher than 3. So this is good news for both countries. In contrast to what was observed above in relation to disciplinary proceedings, in the case of internal financial oversight committees, they tend to exert their duties, their competence, mostly ex officio in 73% of the cases. With the exception of 2 Estonian parties, out of all that we examined, where the internal financial oversight committees constitute the only procedural trigger, party statutes allow these committees to act after requests by other internal governing party bodies in 13% of the cases. Member and external complaints only play, as you can see here, a very marginal role in initiating internal financial oversight committees investigations. In a similar vein to internal ethics management bodies, internal financial oversight committees have their members appointed largely, 57% of the cases, by the party congress or equivalent representative body. Only in a few cases have these been appointed by the party executive, 6%, the party leader, or directly by party members, in 2% of the cases. Membership in this type of committees is incompatible with the discharge of party executive functions in up to 40% of the cases. In those parties where internal financial oversight committees have been established, these tend to be accountable to the party congress, 47% of the cases, and the party executive, 40% of the cases. Internal financial oversight committees are also accountable to the party president in cases like in the Czech Republic, North Macedonia, or also in Slovakia. Only in the case of Montenegro, there is one party where the Internal Financial Oversight Committee is exclusively accountable to the president. Only 4 parties, including Podemos in Spain, do not require internal financial oversight committees to report. And now I will give the floor to my colleague Nina to talk about the different approaches to public integrity.
Thank you so much, Fernando. So, dear colleagues, let me present ODIHR's approach to the study and to the toolkit that soon will be released in May for all political parties in the OSCE region, and I hope that it will serve as a guidance to political parties, also an opening invitation to work with ODIHR, and this work would be very discreet because we work party on an individual level to support them to have a code of conduct, develop or amend existing integrity mechanism and the system. So ODIHR is the principal institution basically within the OSCE dealing with the human dimension matters. And our department, Julia and I represent, and also our dear experts assist us to help with mainly with the parliaments, with parliamentary political parties and anti-corruption agencies. And why we do this work actually, and this is important also to have an understanding then, and we all know the declining trust and legitimacy, first of all, in democratic institutions we observe across the OSCE region, and basically exclusion of the marginalized groups from political processes, especially such as young people, women and persons with disabilities. And we see growing also dissatisfaction and distrust among especially young voters into the institutions, political parties, that at times bring changes in different OSCE regions. So that's why we see the importance to work individually with parliamentary political parties to support, strengthen their integrity and echo mechanisms basically internally. But because we see that the poor record and there would be a better political parties would benefit if the members and also of the political party would have a better understanding to what they sign up. Obviously, most of them know the values, however, how the political internal culture works. And we see this basically that the integrity frameworks and the mechanisms at the ecosystem of the broader corruption and integrity basically mapping, and we see the code of conduct for the parliament. And in OSCE region we can observe that quite few OSCE parliaments, you know that OSCE has 56 countries plus Vatican, including obviously the Spain, and out of 56 at the moment 39 parliaments have integrity systems in place. However, we see that integrity mechanisms of parliaments don't necessarily work ideally as it should be because of different integrity compositions of the integrity bodies and also the mechanisms. Is this somewhere advisory functions and the commissioners present or not? And then what is left for political parties, because the behavior in the chamber and the trust and in a legislative processes can be basically strengthened also by supporting parliamentary political parties to develop their internal integrity mechanisms and tools, because in the end we all know that political parties are the gatekeepers, as we call. They nominate candidates, they propose the list, of course depending on the political system. So that's why the ecosystem also we work with political parties. Another also element would be the code of conduct for the lobbyists, that however the code of conduct for lobbyists is not that much maybe popular in the OSCE region as well, but also we see that the parliaments that have such, like law on lobbyists, on code of conduct in the lobbyists, are not well developed and are not, like adhered to. But I have to say that we have quite few very interesting cases, and we are now at the moment also developing OSCE basic publication reviewing all lobbyist laws on lobbying and the mechanisms that in the parliament, the good practices. Obviously the guidelines or trainings are quite important, and the preventative and educational, because code of conduct and parliamentary integrity or political party integrity is not just about the paper tiger, as we call it, and we claim that ODIHR started using it before other leaders started worldwide. But paper tiger, it means that this is just in place. The parliament or political party has a code of conduct. However, there is no attached mechanism how to basically adjudicate the cases. So that's why we moved from the parliament to parties, and I will not stop here. However, let me focus on the duality of the code. So as I already told, the first is the anti-corruption pillar that a code of conduct of political parties should have, and the second is the tools for safe environment, because also Mr. Pons mentioned, and Julia as well, safety matters, and in political parties one of the ways to tackle violence against women in politics is to have gender sensitive code of conduct for political parties, where female or male would feel safe to file a complaint and to follow the procedure within the political parties first of all, because we will talk about the conflicts that most parties are struck with, the conflicts obviously of a different and corruption or violence cases. However, the most important in a public eye is also how political party dealt with the issue. So that's why we always basically, when we work one-to-one with political parties, and this is, I have to say, confidential talks, because at times when political parties come to us, they tell us, because Fernando was mentioning that in number of parties, for example, if you are for vetting of the candidates whom you put out, that criminal record would be one of the prerequisites not to nominate the candidate. However, sometimes the reality is different. When we worked in some political parties in the OSCE region, in a confidential talk they would say, if we put this in our code of conduct, we won't have candidates. So, like we always try to work and to understand political party, obviously the ecosystem and internal unwritten rules, because all parties have unwritten rules of cultures, and we understand that. And based on when we work with political parties, internal basically mechanisms and the code of conduct or internal bylaws and decisions and etc., we always interview political councils and different members to understand the political culture and to adapt what would function. Some political parties tell us we need in the code of conduct to regulate, for example, social media behavior of our party members, of our candidates. So we always try to put the emphasis on the needs of political parties. However, as a golden standard, we offer that the code of conduct should have these two parallel pillars: anti-corruption and safety and the environment. and why obviously we understand why it's important to have the code of conduct. And in Spanish case, this is perhaps this slide not that relevant, because we understand that in Spain is one of the few, actually only OSCE participating country, that member state, that all political parties have conduct. But to have it, it is really important to ensure that the code is effective, and it is not only needs to be drafted or adopted, but also practiced regularly via oversight. And how to have this oversight mechanism and the sanctions for the misconduct, most importantly, this is something that we try to help political parties to work on. And this is actually the vicious circle, right? Sometimes we fell into this vicious circle. So for political party, ability to resolve the conflicts and develop this is very important, because at times in the OSCE region what we see, conflict happens, it is right away not kept internally, it is publicly, media writes about the conflict, parties fell apart, that create some different, new parties on, etc. However, the code of conduct could be very, actually, if used, very effective tool how to keep conflicts inside, how to deal. Yes, you can then, political party can publish reports, and Fernando was mentioning the percentage of political parties. Basically, some political parties fear to publish their own reports on, for example, on integrity. But some, and it is considered very good practice, that do publicize, but not all information, just the statistics, and it might be even enough for public trust of just to publish statistics within the political parties. We had this year this number of complaints, and this was discussed. Just general information, just a snapshot, and we see that it really helps that public sees the benefit that actually the system could work. So the process of development and implementation of the code of conduct on its own, it is very important, because at times we see, and we discuss it in our guidelines, we times see that leadership of the party, sometimes 2 to 3 people, decide that they know the best what political party code of conduct should entail, and then they draft the document and adopt without the without the consultation with each members. However, we see that at times when members themselves, when we work with political parties, see the drafted code by the leadership, they had also they have arguments on what should be included or not. So we always suggest that political parties, especially when the participating state is big and there is a regional representations and etc. So everyone really at the maximum level possible obviously should be involved in the drafting process, because obviously they bring different perspectives, right? Obviously, we know that there are the formal and informal rules, and code of conduct is one of the good matter to institutionalize, because if there are informal practices in the parties, but with the change of the leadership, basically the established methods of internal cooperation or internal practices might also disappear. And it's always better to have a document and, obviously to establish a system. However, different countries have different attitudes. So some would have statement of values, for example, and some would have code of conduct as a very, very practical, practical syllabus with general terms, basic principles, and etc. When we studied, and here you can see 2 different approaches. For example, in Reform Party of Estonia, in a code of conduct, you can see just a general, terms as a freedom to realize oneself, a well-protected country, perceiving Estonian language and culture, and open society. So for Estonian context, such very broad definitions put in the code of conduct might work, because of the basically the culture and the norms, established norms. However, for example, I am coming from Georgia myself. If you put this in the code of conduct, I mean, it won't be enough for laugh for a lot of political parties, and this is a reality, right? So, but also it's a reality for a number of OSCE participating states, and for example, including the Latvian New Unity Party case, where it is very well rule-based and prescribed, you know, what the code of conduct should entail. We also, Fernando would agree, when we research Spanish also political parties, we see that the more of the Latvian example would apply to your codes of conduct, and this differs obviously, and there are different versions. And when we work with political parties, we also suggest, you know, what to be including the elements in the code of conduct. And obviously, this can be used actually as a very good political asset, and sold and basically communicated to voters. So first of all, it signals to the voters that party is striving to improve its integrity standards, and everyone realizes that all political parties might have problems and the issues. And then it's creating a safe environment for its members, especially those less represented. And Julia was mentioning how young people also assess whether a political party is something that they would like to join. And what we see in the OSCE region, it is very important that out of youth cohort, and young people are more or less 38% of the voters in the OSCE region. Only 2.2% of young people are the members of political party, and it says a lot. Statistics says a lot about this. So code of conduct is a good also political tool, could be really used. And as I mentioned, what anti-corruption and discriminatory, pillars should include. The code of conduct actually for political parties could include such elements as nepotism, conflict of interest, gifts and benefits from political party affiliations, and influence trading. So these elements should be included in the code of conduct. And in times where we see that parliaments the integrity system of the parliament don't work, here, when it comes political party where it could exercise the mandate and work and basically discuss the cases within the party of the nepotism, conflict of interest, and etc. And obviously, the second pillar is anti-discrimination and the intolerance, harassment, and violence that code of conduct should basically include and be prescribed. So basically, the function of the code and the code of code is just an instrument for political party members to understand that the ethics violation as misconduct, bullying, or sexual harassment actually has happened, because at times in the moment, actually you might not realize that you are a victim, or you are in the environment where some corruption cases are unfolding, basically to understand and then know how to proceed and how to seek support and how to file a complaint. And the code of conduct should entail internally the mechanism, how to file a complaint, to whom, how many committee members of ethics body there would be, how the decisions are made, are they fair, if political party member against whom the complaint is made does not agree on the decision that ethics body made, so what happens next, basically, or on the sanctions that don't agree. So all these elements should be included on the code of conduct or a supporting document as a guideline. And obviously, we see that as a good practice, and I'm pretty sure that you are all aware of the candidates' integrity pledges, because in a number of OSCE countries, at times political parties put forward candidates who are not per se members of the political parties. So that's why code of conduct, and we will talk about whom it should entail, and whether it is also later we will discuss whether political party would allow, let's say, outsider to file a complaint to the political party. This is another tool to talk about. Measuring and reporting and reflection on the organizational climate and inclusiveness in the political party. For example, if the ethics body is mandated also to present to the party leadership the organizations and political parties' climate and basically research what members think. This is something very useful for party leadership also to use. Basically, the gathering the data for, and awareness raising for the party leadership that I was implying to. And if training of the party members actually happens, so if they understand, because in some political parties, when you are becoming member, you know that you are just signing off the code of conduct, and then you never heard of the document, or you know, you never know so what it really entails too. So the trainings in this matter would really benefit. And as I mentioned, dear colleagues, these are two internal and external basically cohorts that code of conduct could include. So internal are members of, obviously, political party officials, candidates, government members, nominees to public offices, and volunteers. And then there is a question sometimes that political party ask us, should actually the volunteer and the government member of the political party has the same obligation in the political party? Because there are different responsibilities as well. Well, code of conduct apply to everyone, but then there is obviously the scrutiny itself, then, you know, and the mechanism would have a difference. And then there is externals, right? Because political party does not act in a bubble, and then the political party members basically communicate with others. And our guideline basically also suggests step by step how to what to include in the code of conduct for internal members, for externals, and etc. And external would be public, obviously the media, international partners, because political party members and especially parliamentarians are members of different networks. The same is OSCE, Parliamentary Assembly, or the Council of Europe, right, or NATO PA, and etc. So this international, you know, like ecosystem as well. Coalition members, because obviously political parties at times doesn't exist, you know, separately. They are in the coalitions, and we all know it. So what is also, if the code of conduct should regulate this as well? Suppliers, as Fernando was mentioning, you know, like procurement of the political parties, and this is one of the elements that is many times overlooked. And I have to say in the changing environment and the good practices of parliamentary, like political party finance and oversight, it is recommended that political parties also develop the guidelines for internal political party finance, and some of the main elements of this political party finance are included in the code of conduct as well. And obviously the relations with donors. We have heard a lot of scandals, cases of, you know, like donors relations with political party leaderships and resignments as well. And that this really affects the political careers. That's why this could be used as an asset that to regulate code of conduct and the internal and external, basically, cohorts. And there is basically the potential to engage members of the political party in the process of developing or amending political party code of conduct. And basically it just gives a good signal, and it fosters culture of inclusivity and ownership of the members as well. But let me put straightforward, the code of conduct should be laconic. No one in the political party would read 50 pages document. Right? Code of conduct should be very laconic. However, the guidelines to the code, how to interpret code is important. And the same applies to the parliament, because some of the most established parliamentary, for example, integrity systems, and the UK is a very good practice. Code of conduct, 2 pages. However, the guidelines, how to interpret and how to make the system work, is much more extensive, and the trainings provided and for example, the commissioner. This is something we also, and it obviously we understand that all depends on the resources as well, financial and human as well. For example, if political party would have individual counseling or ethics commissioner, that would really also benefit the system. However, to have political party ethics advisor or commissioner would also imply that one of the member or one of the staffers should have a role, or there should be a separate, for example, role introduced within the political party, right? Yes, and then let me move. Let me move to the current arrangements that we see out of the research. Out of research 90 political parties, as we mentioned, in 25 countries, we see that disciplinary, financial oversight, and some ethics oversight bodies are more or less merged in one. So basically, procurement, financial oversight, disciplinary, there is one body responsible for everything. However, what we suggest in our toolkit would be to have a financial oversight as a separate, obviously, and then as a separate ethics and the conduct oversight that would oversee disciplinary, educational and advisory roles that would entail. So to differentiate the financial and obviously the oversight, because at times when you see, and then we will talk about who should be in the ethics body. And for example, if the party leadership, political council members should be in the ethics body, and our ultimate as ODIHR's recommendation would be not necessarily, because there might be conflict of interest about, of political leadership to be included in the ethics body. And ethics body should be selected and elected by the Congress of the party and should be quite representative. And the different formulas might apply. For example, some would say that in the ethics body there should be a political party member who has a established record of being in that political party at least 10 years, for example. And then someone a newcomer would say, well, I am also the member of a political party. Yes, I'm here for 1 or 2 years, but I also want to, nominate myself, or I represent youth wing, women wing of political party, and etc. So there should be different formulas, and we always try to also work with political parties and help to basically establish the formula and the ethics body. And obviously the code of conduct obviously also should not contradict the statute, because all the political parties have a statute, and sometimes what we see that in the statute there are a lot of elements here and there scattered of the political party code. However, we always suggest that statute is really good, and I mean this is the main governing document of the political party. However, the code of conduct that also aligns with the statute should be there and should exist. Yes. So basically, ethics oversight bodies. So what ethics oversight bodies should do and what functions they should have. Giving the guidance to party members, first of all, in situations of ethical dilemmas, and we all know that there are conflicts, there are internal political party, basically also competition, and we all know that there are different, sides of one political party that compete, maybe for the leadership and etc. And this is quite normal. However, the ethical dilemmas could be solved by, internally. The counseling is very important, because at times you are not maybe very well aware whether you should not accept, for example, gifts that exceed certain number of amount, €100, for example. All institutions have their standards, or, for example, what is the influence trading? Maybe you are speaking at a coffee with your close friend who happens to be, in a board of one of the business, companies that wants to advance the law, and then you are casually discussing some existing, dilemmas or changes in the legislation, etc. And then you are realizing that, oh, actually, this is something that could be adhered to the, influence trading and etc. So these are the elements that might not be right away become visible. However, this counseling would allow to at least, and obviously confidential counseling. If political party member doesn't trust the ethics body, then nothing will work, obviously, right? So I wouldn't go, for example, myself to anti-corruption body, and if I don't trust, and say, oh, here I breached something, and would you advise me what was it right or not? Because I might be reprimanded, right? So we understand actually the ecosystem and how it should function. And basically organizing and the things and gathering data is important, because code of conduct is not something that you adopt and then that's it. The document is there in system. It should evolve, and it's absolutely fine to political party to change things, to make things what doesn't work for them. And this is something we also have the same approach with parliaments in this regard, because when we see that parliaments we assess parliamentary integrity actually mechanism, and ODIHR supports the parliament in this way as well to assess if integrity works, and then also offer recommendations and to change. And we have here Luis, who developed the guidance, a parliamentary assessment tool with us, and this is something that we will be actually hope soon to work with a few parliaments to assess integrity mechanism. And when we work with the parliaments to develop the code of conduct, we always suggest and tell them that in a couple of year time, 3-4 year time, you would need to assess if the system works. If it doesn't, it's okay. It is done for you, and you need to amend the system. The same applies to parliamentary political party as well internally. And we are happy because we know that Spanish political parties have actually in place code of conduct. So we are here not to tell you to develop the new one, but obviously to amend perhaps the existing ones and enhance basically the means, the mechanism, how it can be applied and made it more workable document and the mechanism. Reporting, as I mentioned, and at the times political parties are hesitant to publish reports, annual reports on their internal, because they think that it might be took as a political, like tool. Again, like adversaries will use it in their comments with media and etc. However, if you put out the glimpse of the mapping of what political parties have done internally to adhere to anti-corruption and integrity standards, it might be used as a very good political benefit to you, basically, between the public eyes to acknowledge, yes, we have a problem, but this is how many cases we had, what the decisions made, and what is the progress. Just numbers would help as well. And also because political party is as we call it, it is also it's a beast of its own. And then the regions, obviously, that sometimes it is not easy to also have a pulse on the local branches of the regions, how they function also, and what political party members, like what is their internal ecosystem, depending also on their internal regional party politics or etc. So this is also important to have in the region the focal points, ethics focal points, to basically, first of all, make them regional local representatives also heard at the like at the national party levels, but also to not lose the connection, because at times it is easy to lose the connection, and sometimes basically internal conflict that happens, or scandals in the regions of the political party branches affect the like the national at the bigger scale. That's why it's really important to have a focal point as advisors, for example. So yes. And I talked a bit about the selection of oversight bodies, and our toolkit basically covers the selection procedure of the members of ethics bodies, ability of members to combine offices, so what are the conflicts of interest that are put there, qualifications and limitations, what ethics body members should have, and overall, like the concept of inclusivity and the gender parity as well. So when we talk about paper tiger, why it is a kind of quite catchy terminology? Because it is really good to have good law, integrity system, but if it doesn't bite, it doesn't make sense, right? So if there is no gradual sanctions, that no one will, yes, you can write the report, but then what? So basically, as a gradual sanctions, we always suggest to have first of all, public apology, because apology sometimes matters, in front of the members and individual, in question, obviously. A warning calling not to repeat the concrete conduct, obviously. well, there could be, as a escalation, the reprimand and exclusion from the party meetings or party events from certain time of the period, and as a very last resort, as a reserved measures, then exclusion from the political party, right, as a sanction. But this is obviously very last recommendations that we will give to political party to include in the code of conduct elements of the sanction. And I have to tell, because we are now in the Senate, and I have to tell from our experience with the parliaments and with the different political systems that we see, sometimes if you say, for example, in the UK, if the parliament decides that the law was breached, sorry, not the law, but the ethics was breached, they might, like suspend candidate, they might suspend parliamentary, the member of the parliament for 14 days. You know, as a tool, it's like as a 14 days, 2 weeks, not yes, but then it really affects their political career, because in the UK, for example, with the electoral code, if the member of the parliament is suspended for 14 days, then there could be a re-election procedure started. And they used it quite often, I have to say it, and many MPs lost their seats because of, this duality, these two pillars. First of all, integrity mechanism, and then also electoral code, and in combination, political party member and the parliamentarian might lose a seat, actually. So we see in the OSCE region different elements, how it is practiced and preached, and we have some very good, practices. So we always offer to have it, some measures as well, but not to scare away member of the political party, obviously. So what we offer as ODIHR, we offer tailored approach by this toolkit and by practice to political parties' needs. It will be the confidential process done by one-on-one with one-on-one parliamentary political party. First of all, we analyze the statute and the related internal documents of political parties. We conduct in-depth interviews with political party, representatives and the members, to understand internal political culture and the needs, and then we develop the guidance note for political party, how to amend or how to develop the code of conduct and integrity mechanism in place. Then we present the guidelines, and then we conduct, we deliver a session to broader political party members on amendments or on the developing of the code of conduct, and then the process starts. Basically, then it is up to political party to amend the code or to develop one, and then we are happy to receive amended code, and then to provide comments to the amended code based on different practices and also good practices in the OSCE region and international standards. So this is what we offer. This process is not like one-off. It would require from 6 to 9 months cooperation when we start. We start work and we just inform all parliamentary political parties that we are in this process, and we offer the support to all parties. I have to say that the toolkit that I presented, there is a snapshot and the ways we, the logic and how we see the toolkit and integrity support is not the only document. Before this, we published public ethics and integrity toolkit step-by-step guideline for parliaments. And as we already mentioned, Parliament was first. And now we will be publishing in May, actually very soon, the toolkit for for political parties, obviously how to develop step-by-step or amend political party ethics integrity system and the code of conduct itself. So it will be published, and you just see the, like the covers that was soon, and we will be very happy to communicate, the toolkit itself, and then work on one-on-one with a political parties. So we just need to receive from political parties request the letter, and then we will respond to this letter and we will start the process. So this is very easy and straightforward. And if we receive from only one parliamentary political party request, we start the work, but then as simultaneously we offer the support, we send, you know, to parliamentary political parties information that this is available for you, you as well, you know, from different parties. So this is a process. And with this, thank you so much. I guess we have a 10 minutes for a Q&A, and there will be afterwards a coffee break of the 15 minutes, and then we will have a panel of very interesting our guests coming, and Julia will perhaps present. But if you have to Fernando, who presented with Luis, who conducted amazing research with 90 political parties, and myself, you have questions, please feel free to ask them now. Okay. So, what you want? Yeah. So I guess with this, if there is no question, so I hope that we spoke eloquently and it was well received and understood, first of all, if there are no questions. But dear colleagues, now I guess we will have a coffee break, maybe extended one, right? And we come here at 10:45 for a very good panel discussion.
No, I will make a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
know if you covered that, but I don't think so. Do you recommend I mean, when someone is trying to denounce or to make a complaint on some behavior of the party, that to keep it in secret, or, I mean, to do it like how do you, anonymity on the reporting channel, I mean, on the reporting channel, or, because there is a big debate on that, if it helps or it doesn't help, especially for women and harassment, and if these denouncers are anonymous, could be, I mean, how do you maintain the ethical level, or how do you keep that kind of, do you have?
Valentina, nice to see you.
Nice to see you
Thank you so much for your participation and for all the work that you have done as well to make this happen. It is a complicated issue. There are different practices, but as a common sense, it's very difficult to take an anonymous complaint forward because it is anonymous. So if there is, should any investigation happen, it's very difficult to take it forward. It is anonymous. What can be done is parties can run surveys that are anonymous to collect what is happening in the party. But should something happen, there should be a confidential procedure. So meaning that the identity will not be known except those who need to know, who are part of the process. But there should be, of course, an environment and culture that can guarantee that. And if people understand that the process is not confidential, they will, stop coming forward. But it is very difficult to deal with anonymous complaints because they are anonymous. If you want to engage, of course, if we're talking about serious offense, it will be the method for police. And police also don't deal with anonymous, right? But it's very hard to deal with those not serious, but also not nothing situations. If they are completely anonymous. I don't know if my colleagues want to add something. Please feel free. We understand the concern. We understand that for victims to come forward, it is very difficult. But this is why it should be a victim-centered, trauma-informed approach. What does this mean? It's very simple, that the victim doesn't need to explain 1,000 times what happened. There should be immediately support provided because it's very difficult for the victim. You re-traumatize yourself again and again, and then the victim at some point is like, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot tell to a third person what happened again because I'm breaking down every time I'm speaking about this. So there should be a protocol that is designed in a very sensitive manner that gives protection and the potential for mediation, for remedy. But it should be focused, of course, on the person to give them safety. But it's very hard to do it with anonymity.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to mention perhaps something that is closely related. I already mentioned that in many cases, in fact in 12.2% of the cases, the disciplinary action decisions were made public. So it is not recommended, but parties tend to deal with these issues skillfully and in secret, which is not the way forward. For the sake of time, I didn't present some of the findings from the qualitative study, but for example, it's not only anonymity or secrecy. We found we had these interviews with these 21 political officials, party officials in 18 countries. The disciplinary actions against party members, officials, and candidates and representatives are exceptional. So it's not only about the issue of being secretive or not; they are exceptional, and in a very limited number of cases where ethical misconduct was met, there was no disciplinary action. So you see the whole process. Sometimes things look very nice in theory, but the practice is a different thing. And this is where the qualitative part of our study somehow complements and in some cases contradicts the quantitative survey.
Maybe I just want to add something, because we were discussing now about this idea of harassment and also the idea of harassment via the social media networks. And you know perfectly that in the last weeks, as the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, we were in the middle of a case of a clear harassment in the social networks, first to a civil servant and second to a woman. And the relation is, for me, was amazing, because it was between people who were anonymous, then from MPs, and on the other side you had people who was not a woman, who was not even capable to respond. So we are also in this new trend in the media, in the social networks, in which you can attack, you can say whatever you want, from Hungary to, I don't know, everywhere in the region, via Twitter or Instagram, and there is no capacity to respond or to block anything. So I think this is a new, and in all of the election observations that I've mentioned before, we have all this idea of interference, but also this new trend in which you can attack a person, and there is no way to protect this person in the social media. So I think this is something that it has to be tackled, and not only between an MP and another MP, but between MP, civil servants, etc. So for me, it's really, really shocking what I witnessed in the last 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, thank you very much for mentioning this. The tech-facilitated violence is a big issue. It's very visible around elections, but women in politics know that it actually never stops, because it gets into their DMs, direct messages. It's not always visible to outside people. And it's a big concern, and there is no easy solution. So the code of conduct obviously regulates behavior of the members of the party. So whoever is not a member of the party, this code of conduct doesn't apply to them. So it's just one of the tools where we try to create safe space. Countries are now experimenting with different laws. One of them is Online Safety Act in the UK, but so far it didn't prove to be a good tool for gendered political violence. It mostly has been used against incitement to hatred, racial hatred online that led to very unfortunate violent attacks, I think a few years ago. So people are experimenting with this legislation, but it's still very weak. In OSCE country, we don't have one country that has a law on violence against women in politics. It's not recognized as a concept. It's not understood as a gendered violence, so it's not about views of the woman. it's just about the fact of being a woman, so your place is in the kitchen, you don't belong, this is a man's world, you know nothing. And then, of course, there is a lot of misogyny, you're too pretty, you're too ugly, you're too fat, you're too thin, you're too young, you're too old. So there are some good practices in, I mean, on I don't want to say on paper. There are legal initiatives in Latin America. Bolivia has a law, but implementation has been really unsatisfactory. So we are now, as humanity, we are evolving to understand with internet and AI as well. This is a new frontier, but it's very difficult to regulate online bots. It's very difficult to regulate unknown people where you cannot even establish their identity. So what we know, a lot of female politicians, they have a buffer between themselves and the social media. They have someone else read their social media now as a protection, just not to see this, not to be exposed. But the burden should not be on the victim. Yeah, the burden should not be on the female politician or civil servant. But I'm afraid there is no solution at this point. ODIHR does have a toolkit on violence against women in politics. We just released the final tool, which is testimonies of 19 women, the women politicians, so you can look that up as well. But there are not many workable solutions yet. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add also to the answer that we observe also in some countries, for example, that the code of conduct for PTFs, and this is a Greco's terminology, basically persons with entrusted functions that, for example, would include prime minister, president, you know, like ministers or, you know, advisors to the president and etc. So basically the code of conduct for PTFs is something that also Greco first of all, you know, like evaluates as well. And we see that the relations with the parliamentarians, when for example ministers come and are summoned, and when the parliament is practicing its oversight function, there could be also in a chamber basically quite violent discussions and offensive ones between the government officials and the parliamentarians. And I could remember that the very recent case was in Armenia, where quite interesting one, where there were such the prime minister's questioning, I think, in the parliament, and which that got very offensive on the individual levels. And when the anti-corruption body called CPC in Armenia basically started the investigation against the prime minister on the matter of disconduct in the chamber, because chamber could not have done it itself, because first of all it is now developing code of conduct, and then even if that code doesn't cover the basically the prime minister or high-level officials, and that based on it was a good case, because after the CPC published the report, prime minister publicly apologized to basically to the members of the opposition and of the and to the parliament on the behavior. And this is one of the examples that there should be basically the body who can also start the investigation. And it brings us also to the very good question whether any of the body should be eligible to start investigation on their own, from the media reports and etc. But obviously the social media is a wild field, and the tech regulation is quite important to try at least to regulate or how political party would act if something unethical would be published by the political party member or representative, first of all, and also perhaps how political party can defend its own, members or political party representatives by the statement. Would it be including in the code of conduct, for example, that the political party is obliged also to, if something harassment happens against the political party member, what would be the actions? It is very individual. It depends on the country, depends on political party, and etc. But yes, thank you. One question. There is one question from Luis. Yes. Okay, we have a 15-minute break. Thank you. We come here 10:45.
Dear colleagues, let's resume our second part of today's event. I am Yulia Netesova. I'm Chief of Democratic Governance and Gender Unit. I'll be moderating the panel today that will continue exploring the topics of integrity in political parties. And maybe in order to set the scene, I wanted to say that the issues of integrity in political parties are very widespread in OSCE. They're not limited to one particular country or one particular party, which is a sad common denominator, but that's what it is. And my colleagues Nini and Fernando spoke about issues that are relevant, what makes the integrity, the different aspects, from internal party democracy to money issues to behavior issues. There is so much that integrity means. And when preparing for this panel, I wanted to see, what we did not talk in the morning was, of course, we didn't talk about scandals, because the session is not about scandals, but the scandals are what brought us here in the first place, right? And we have seen that the scandals happen in many, many OSCE participating states. In Romania, Austria, North Macedonia, Norway, Denmark, you can continue the list. Basically, in every country, there would be an issue related to some lack of integrity and ethics in political parties. I wanted to maybe take a very far-away historical example of Italy and Bettino Craxi. If you colleagues, does anyone know Bettino Craxi? The famous Italian politician who was investigated as part of the process Mani Pulite that exposed massive corruption in political parties in Italy. And Bettino Craxi was a long-standing prime minister, and what was interesting was his reaction when this process exploded. He said, he was not, saying, oh, no, this didn't happen. He said, this is happening. The whole system is bad. So it was a very interesting combination of part confession, part accusation, like part self-defense, like don't single me out, because that's how the system is. It's a structural issue. And people were shocked and amazed. And, when he was leaving the court, people were throwing coins at him. So he thought this would help him somehow maybe collaborate, maybe, exonerate himself. It didn't. As a result, he actually emigrated and, died in Hammamet in North Africa as a result. And this process completely purged the entire class, political class in the early 90s of the first Italian Republic and exposed a lot of issues. And it made us understand that democracy does begin in political parties, and integrity does start in political parties. It just ends in the parliaments that are the most visible, but the processes start long time before that. And in ODIHR, we very often say political parties are gatekeepers of democracy, and very often we say that in a negative connotation, saying that they keep the gates closed for women and young people. But gatekeeping also has a very positive connotation, because as a gatekeeper, you should filter what kind of politicians come to your party. Do they comply with the standards, with the vision, with the ethical requirements? So gatekeeping can also be a good thing. So political parties are gatekeepers, and we would like to see integrity that is not, personal, like, oh, I don't like this person, they should be out, or political, or they didn't support me on this policy, out. No, it should be about public good. Of course, there will be always a political aspect to this, because right and left have different understanding of the same social and economic phenomena. There should be some discretion, when it comes to ideological differences, but still there should be same standard of decency and human behavior. And thanks to the research that ODIHR has done, we can see that this is no longer a niche topic. It is really picking up, because political parties understand they're losing trust. As Nini was saying, 2% of youth are members of political parties. And this is the huge voting electorate that will be voting for far longer than the elder generation. And they don't want to join political parties. So the political parties know it. And we talk to political parties in many countries. They all want to attract more members. and they really, many of them really want to be a good political party. At the same time, they need to balance this with political conflict, competition, victory. So it's really not an easy job, and we feel for political parties. The research showed that there is a gap between challenge and reply. Oversight is super weak. Internal political party procurement is a massive red flag. And we see political parties use informal rules, which make it very difficult to have any process. How do you have a process if everything is informal? Very hard. So we will look into different aspects of this in today's panel. We have lined up for you 4 speakers. One of them is delayed. And if you look into statistics the way that I do, we have lined up 3 amazing female speakers from Spain with the names all start with E. I'm not sure how this happened, but that's the truth. We have Elena, Elisa, and Estefania. And then we have a male colleague from Portugal under the name Luis. You know how they do these kids' games. Find the odd one out. Yes?
Ginger.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Sorry, my brain sometimes works in funny patterns. But I think you will really enjoy the people who are here today. They have different hats and different expertise. It's a combination of academia, media, activism, legal actions. I think it will be really, really interesting. Some of them have several hats as well. And I will ask my first question, and we'll have to keep it in order to keep it dynamic, I would like to ask all the members of the panel to be brief. Each answer is around 4 minutes in total. The first question will be the same to all of the panel members. I wanted to ask you, so how do you think political parties can, on the one hand, strengthen the internal integrity and frameworks, and to balance it with the external accountability, transparency, and have members joining in? So this is, I think, one of the biggest pulls that the parties have, how to clean up internally and deliver externally. What do you think is the way forward? And I will ask for the first person will be, in my order, Elena is still not here, so I will ask Luis. And colleagues, I will present to you briefly each panelist. Luis de Souza is a principal researcher at the Institute of Social Sciences, University of Lisbon, and is an expert in corruption control, political ethics and governance. He has published extensively on party self-regulation and serves as the chair of the IPSA Research Committee on Political Finance and Political Corruption. So Luis knows political parties inside out in many, many countries and many continents. So how do we harmonize those 2 things, Luis? You have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, and good morning to everyone. Buenos días a todos. Hablaré en inglés, no porque no pueda hacerme comprender en portuñol, pero creo que es la lengua que hemos adoptado, así que voy a hablaros en inglés. Let me start with a point that was referred by the first deputy speaker in the first session, and that you mentioned in your presentation, which is the context of all these initiatives we're seeing worldwide, because we are mapping these efforts even beyond Europe now. We have a research project on party ethics self-regulation. I can assure you there's a lot of it in Latin America, also in Africa, Asia. So we're going through all these different regions, and they're very interesting stuff we're discovering. But let me start with the point that was made earlier on, that trust is the cement of democracy. Trust in political institutions has been negatively affected by all these scandals that Julia mentioned. And for parties in particular, when we look at the Eurobarometer data for the last 20 years, they've scored less than 20% of trust. That's very low for the very central institutions of our democratic system. So this is not a joke. This is about the future of democracy. This is about how the engine of democracy is performing. We have other data that it's not very encouraging also. When we ask people about their level of trust on the party financing supervision across Europe, it's also very negative. We have around 2/3 of respondents that think there is insufficient transparency and supervision of party financing. And the two together lead me to a question prior to the one Julia has made, and I will answer about the internal and external dimension, which is very clear. We read time after time as academics, and Fernando is there, he knows I'm not saying anything that we already don't know. Regulation by law fails. Fails, we know that. Party financing, incompatibilities, conflict of interest rules, you name it, we keep saying it fails. Okay, so why should party ethics self-regulation work any better? Why do we expect this to work better than regulation by law? This is not a straightforward answer, but, and I don't think party ethics self-regulation will automatically solve the problems of transparency, integrity and accountability. Nina was very clear about this, but it's a layer. It's a layer, so it's not a sufficient condition, but it's a necessary condition. And why? Because it reconfigurates the locus of control and accountability. One of the problems we have with regulation by law is that parties have the excuse that it doesn't work because the political financing supervisory body is not doing this job. But now it's with you. Why is your party not working? Why have you not done the job? So it reconfigurates the locus of control and responsibility. And for that reason, party ethics self-regulation has this issue of organizational agency. But the parties, they have to demonstrate they are able to govern their own ethical conduct, that they have the capacity to autonomously define, interpret, enforce standards of conduct for their members. And what does happen if they don't do it? I mean, Rogo and Laswell, they were telling this in 1963. They have a book where they tell us very clearly that any institution, doesn't matter only political parties, businesses, parliaments, governments, any organization, if they don't establish and enforce and internalize ethical standards for their members, the likelihood of corruption to become endemic is very high. So we can't just push the problem towards the courts, push the problems towards the legal system. We are requested to act. And now coming to your question, because this is the point.
The time is up, Luis.
But I answer to you in one sentence. When we talk about self-regulation, we talk about layers of regulation. So when we say we have a law on party financing, what does the law on party financing say? We need to have a financial officer within the party. Okay, so what are the procedures, what are the requisites for this financial officer? I need to put this in the statutes. Now tell me how many statutes we've come across that this issue is clarified. The roles of the financial officer are clarified. So I'm not saying party financing self-regulation is a solution, but it's part of the solution and it's a layer of this multiple regulation.
Thank you so much. So we need different layers of regulation with clarity in all of them. And of course, I love the point that we need to push back the agency to the political parties, because it's so easy when someone else is in charge of regulating you and they are not doing the job, you will say, well, it's not me to blame. And I will pass the floor now to Elisa de la Nuez with the same question, and I will introduce Elisa. So Elisa is a lawyer and a member of the State Attorney's Corps and Secretary General of the iDerecho Foundation. She specializes in rule of law, transparency and accountability, and is a regular contributor to public debate on democratic governance. So, dear Elisa, what is your take on this question? 4 minutes, please.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. I will speak Spanish, if you don't mind, because some of the legal terms I'm more comfortable in Spanish, and I prefer not to make some errors that could be I think, of some importance. Bueno, en relación con la cuestión de la regulación, que me parece importantísima, yo soy de las personas que pienso que estoy totalmente de acuerdo con Luis. Hay varios niveles de regulación, pero el primero tiene que ser la regulación, digamos, de verdad. ¿Por qué digo esto? Porque en España, por ejemplo, la regulación de los partidos políticos es muy laxa y esto es importante que lo entendamos. Tiene un origen histórico. Los partidos políticos no existen en España, como es lógico, cuando llega la democracia. Hay una primera ley que es preconstitucional del año 78 que prácticamente lo que quiere es que cualquiera pueda montar un partido político y, por tanto, le va a dar con mucha generosidad, muchas competencias a la regulación interna de los partidos, es decir, a los estatutos, a los reglamentos internos. Después hay una ley ya en el año 2002, pero que tiene 8 o 9 artículos, para que bueno, quizá un poco más, pero para que nos demos cuenta de que realmente el punto de vista del legislador español es un punto de vista casi de un partido político. Es una entidad de derecho privado, porque está así basada en la ley de asociaciones del año 77. Esto tiene un origen histórico, ¿no? Pero tiene unas consecuencias jurídicas, que es que se percibe más bien como una autorregulación dentro de unos límites, pero son unos límites, insisto, amplios, ¿no? El artículo 6 de la Constitución pide que su organización y funcionamiento interno sean democráticos, pero realmente le da mucho margen a los estatutos y a los reglamentos internos de los partidos, digamos, para aterrizar estas ideas. Y tenemos otro problema añadido con el control de esta regulación, que es muy difícil que llegue a los tribunales de justicia y además va a llegar por la vía del derecho privado. Y esto no es una tontería, porque va a llegar por la vía de la regulación del derecho de asociación y, como mucho, por la vía de los derechos fundamentales, el derecho, por ejemplo, a la participación democrática. Por tanto, en España al menos sí tenemos un problema con la regulación, digamos la hard law, no la soft law, que es previa, que tiene un origen histórico, que hemos puesto de manifiesto muchas veces en los debates. Yo, por ejemplo, en el año 2013, pues con otras personas de la sociedad civil, lideramos una iniciativa que consiguió bastantes firmas, en un momento además de mucho problema con los partidos políticos, con la corrupción, donde se hablaba de mejorar la regulación de los partidos, ¿no? Y, de hecho, nosotros, quizá de una forma ingenua, hablábamos de una regulación mucho más extensa, digamos, que limitase mucho más las competencias de los partidos, estableciendo cosas como congresos a fecha fija, no cuando, digamos, los líderes del partido deciden. Los órganos de contrapeso no pueden ser nombrados por, como he estado comprobando esta mañana, por los propios órganos directivos del partido, esas comisiones de garantía, esas comisiones de cumplimiento normativo, si dependen al final de la ejecutiva, no son realmente órganos de contrapeso interno, y por muy bonitos que pintes los códigos de conducta, que los pintan bonitos, bueno, la realidad es que esto no va a funcionar, como hemos visto muy recientemente, con escándalos que tampoco mencionaré, recientes en España, donde se hacen denuncias serias, ¿no?, dentro del partido, a través de los órganos internos, del canal de denuncias, y eso no llega a ninguna parte y, digamos, se termina porque no existe una garantía de cumplimiento de esos órganos dentro del partido, porque, insisto, se les ha dejado de alguna forma que se diseñen pues a la medida de las cúpulas del partido. Yo con esta primera enfoque lo dejo aquí para respetar el tiempo.
Thank you so much. And I can relate definitely to what you mentioned. We sometimes discuss that political parties are sometimes similar to civil society in a way that they are so fluid, and it's association of citizens. So to try to bring structure to that, what you were trying with the good intentions, does not always work, which was your experience as well. Thank you so much, dear Elisa. And my next question is to Estefania on my right. The same question, and let me introduce to you Estefania. Estefania Molina is a political scientist and a journalist. She's also a columnist for El País. She covers Spanish politics and public institutions, and is the author of El Berinque Político and Los Hijos de los Boomers. I guess talking about the kids of the boomers, the younger generation, and the grievances. So, Estefania, what is your take on this? How can the political parties balance the inside work with the outside expectation of accountability? You have 4 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be today in this meeting. Thank you for inviting us. I'll try to represent Spanish media as far as I can do that. And, okay, my perspective is very related to the state of democracy nowadays in Spain. I think we have problems with new generations. Young people are disconnected to the idea of democracy. 1 out of 4 young people think that maybe democracy is not the best system. They will be willing to explore authoritarian regimes and so on. And if we go to the causes of this phenomenon, maybe we can find the disaffection with the outcomes of the system in the material perspective, okay? But we have to do something to fight against the declining of the trust towards institutions, and I think the parties has a lot to do with that. If we go to some cases that are being held on trial in Spain, we have corruption cases, alleged sexual abuse cases, and so on. So from the perspective of the ethics, I think we have to know how political opinion works. And I'll try to explain this general landscape to understand what we can do. First of all, I think that when a corruption case arises, there is an attempt in general from parties to protect the accused individual. So the party tries to mislead the importance of what is happening. This is very common in Spain and I think in all the countries. Afterwards, there's an often claim that the media are constructing a false narrative. So the media rise to be like the enemy to fight against, and I think it's very common in a polarized system because, you know, all media have sensibilities, maybe right media, left-wing media, but the media we are pointed out as an enemy from populist leaders, and that's another problem. Some people nowadays read newspapers or listen to the radio or watch television expecting media to confirm their biases on the topic. And I think there's also an effort in Western democracies to discredit the judicial investigations. Now, part of the narrative is people saying that the judge itself, the justice, is going against the party because they want to overthrow democracy and so on. And what is happening, I think, is with time, as the time goes by, the cases become part of the landscape. So the media, as an institution, we have to do a lot of pedagogy. We have to educate people to understand that all these narratives come from populist parties, from populist leaders, and I think that polarization is being proved very useful to mask all what is happening now. And first of all, I think that parties should understand that the more they delay taking action against these cases, the more they suffer consequences in elections. I do think that maybe it's slow, maybe it's hard, but with time we realize that many parties has lost popular support and other parties has appeared in order to criticize what was happening in Spain. Bipartidism exploded because new parties and new generations were fed up with all the situations. And for me, inside the parties, if we look at it with this perspective, it's difficult sometimes to expose or to assume that they have rotten apples in the party, because they have this idea that it will have a cost in elections immediately. And I think this is a wrong state of mind, because it's been proved that if disciplinary mechanisms work, it's easier to overcome the situation on the media. But the most important is that we are in this situation, polarization and populism.
Yes. Thank you so much, dear Stefania, for reminding us about the broader context in which political parties exist. And I think for young people, it's so hard to grow up in this, to really not have an experience of non-polarized politics, because all they know is this, where each side just hates the other one with so much, strengthened, which leads also to cartoon villains and really doomsday future scenarios. It's really hard, and I think also, like, how can you see future if those are the narratives you are exposed to? Dear Elena, welcome. I will give the floor to our fourth panelist. Elena Herrero Beaumont is the co-founder and director of Ethosfera and the board member of Transparency International Spain. She's an expert in transparency, governance and ethical standards, and a regular contributor to public debate on integrity and democratic values. So Elena, the question was, how can political parties on the one hand work on internal reform, but also respond to the need to provide external accountability and increase their membership? Please, you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia, and I'm sorry for the delay. And good morning to all. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you, Valentina, for suggesting my name to this very interesting conversation and research as well. I'm going to study the paper you sent, and that was presented this morning. So, Julia, you just mentioned that parties are very similar to civil society organizations. And I like to compare...
We debate that.
We can debate that, but I'd like to compare political parties with companies, especially in this era of stakeholder capitalism. And companies have done a lot of work when it comes to governance, when it comes to transparency, when it comes to accountability to all those investors, to the public. And there's many people, because Ethosfera is very much focused on companies. And many people come to me and say, why don't we extend all these mechanisms to political parties? So I think this conversation that the OECD is bringing, OSCE is bringing, is very relevant at this point. So I don't think we're going to resolve or solve the problem that we have in political parties with more norms. I don't think that norms and ethics codes are the solution to the current problems that political parties are facing. I think that we are in a moment of transformation with all these technologies. I think the risks of disinformation and polarization are changing most of the rules of the game. And so these risks are contributing to many dynamics, inner dynamics and also external dynamics that are reducing tremendously the credibility rates in political parties and also media organizations. And in fact, according to the Edelman annual report on trust, companies are perceived as more credible, as more effective than other organizations such as political parties and the media. And I think that we need to focus more on those factors. I mentioned a few that are threatening political organizations, such as disinformation and polarization, but we can also focus on inner factors. For example, biases that we all have. It's well known that each of us perceives oneself as more ethical than the neighbor. And in fact, we are as potentially unethical and corrupted as the neighbor, right? There's also blind spots, and there's also a system of incentives that are very relevant to touch on. For example, salaries, how politicians make a living, revolving doors. How do we address those inner mechanisms? To me, it's more relevant. So for me, it's very important the culture, it's very important the incentives, and it's very relevant to work on this more than norms.
Thank you so much. This concludes our first round of questions that had the same question to all of our panelists. As you can see, they have different backgrounds, so the answer, of course, was varied and very, very interesting. I also wanted to add from my side that trying to analyze the damage that the scandals did in different parties, in different OSCE participating states, I could see that the problem was that, and I also mentioned this in the morning, that it's not just an individual failure, but it's more of a failure of internal controls inside the political party that could not prevent it and also could not deal with it until it all exploded in the public sphere, or as a result of leak or media investigation. It really frustrates people. The second was that very often when the issue is around the core brand of a political party, when a party that is actively saying we are against corruption suddenly is affected by corruption cases, or when progressive party is, swamped by Me Too accusations, it really creates this dual reality for voters and a certain level of hypocrisy. And also the way you handle this, of course, post-crisis is extremely important. So how is it? You anti-corruption and then your leader goes down on corruption charges. And the third one is a leadership vacuum that those cases very often leave. Because most cases, they expose the top brass. And then when those things happen, there are resignations, and it's very difficult to find who one will step in post-crisis, because you need to clean up. And by the way, very often it is a woman that is pushed forward to clean up. It's called a glass cliff when you're given a job that is impossible to do. We have seen it in a number of OSCE participating states. So those are like three structural issues. So it's an internal control failure, if it attacks the core brand of the party, and the leadership vacuum. So it's a very, very serious topic. But scandal also, what we have seen, if processed properly, can lead to meaningful reform. So, of course, scandals are sad, but once they happened, I think each party should see how they can galvanize, learn, understand what did not work, and close those gaps, right? And identify people who are really strongly relating to integrity and push them forward. So, and we will go to the second round of comments, and I will continue with the same order that we established. And the question will be to Luis, and we will go back to the nitty-gritty of code of conduct. Of course, we understand there are different layers, so maybe let's take a look at those layers. Luis, sorry, I cannot see you, but I know you're there. What are the key elements of a political party code of conduct that will make it a living instrument rather than just a formal document? And you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we've talked about these different layers, and whether the party politics, the party law, or the party financing law evolves or not, parties can still have the organizational agency to move forward. They don't depend on the other process, which is a more timely process that involves a lot of parties. There's negotiations. And this, again, it's a reason for diffused responsibility, because they're going to say, we wanted to do more, but we had to negotiate the minimal standards, and that's why there was a deadlock and we didn't move forward. Well, you can move forward on your own. You can still move forward on your own through these initiatives of self-regulation. So the onus of how you calibrate your level of commitment has to do with the parties themselves. They may choose a more robust internal accountability enforcement or symbolic compliance. We see the same in the business sector, and so there's nothing new on this. So I would say that foremost we need leadership commitment, as Julia was saying. I mean, we need party elites to endorse, to promote, to actively use and enforce ethical standards within party organizations. And for that you need rule and procedure, because otherwise in pinnacle hierarchical organizations, and we noticed that parties that have weak institutionalization, they tend to be pyramidal, and the disciplinary action tends to be taken by the leadership with no due process, right? So I find someone, I think he needs to be kicked off, that's it, full stop, and that I clean the house by kicking out people without due process. This is not what we are underlining here. So this leadership commitment is important to protect the most important asset of an organization, which is the reputation. The reputation. And the fact is that electoral support, and we're not surprised that young people are not adhering to parties, because voters rely on reputational cues. They rely on competence, yes, but they also rely on what parties are doing in terms of integrity and credibility. And that's important. There is a brand that needs to be protected if we want to use a more kind of managerial type of language. Also for coalition, for building coalitions, this is important. As Julia was saying, the cordon sanitaire is often one of the reasons why parties are engaging in these kind of initiatives, because they don't want to be taken as the other corruption-tainted parties. So they want to say we have a different way of dealing with this type of... That doesn't mean that I'm immune to cases. It just means I am prepared to deal with them. Okay? So we need operational clarity, we need also credible enforcement, timely, proportional, consistent, and above all, we need these statutes, these codes of conduct, to be embedded and integrated in the daily running of the organization. If this has no implications for candidate selection, forget about it. Forget about it. Okay? It's very simple. You just endure the same problem. Unless you feel the pain, unless you feel that you can be left out of the game, these codes will be absolutely meaningless.
Yes. Thank you so much, Luis, for closing with the transition to the next question, saying that there should be also negative incentives to behave. Thank you so much. And actually, the question that I prepared to Elisa and also references what Elena said. Dear Elisa, and you have noted in some of your statements before that beyond individual cases, there is a system of incentives that enables unethical behavior and undermines the whole drive for integrity. How do you think political parties can build a culture of integrity, especially in those contexts where there are informal practices, tacit agreements that keep undermining the incentives, that keep undermining the drive for integrity? 4 minutes, please.
Sí, okay. Creo que efectivamente lo que se ha dicho es muy claro, ¿no? Habéis hablado, han hablado los anteriores panelistas de la importancia de la reputación, de si eso es un activo en la competencia electoral, es decir, el que tú puedas decir, no, mi partido sí que tiene esta integridad, sí que persigue las conductas incorrectas, que eso sea de alguna forma una ventaja competitiva. Pero claro, también ha dicho Estefanía, en un entorno muy polarizado, en un entorno donde, por lo menos en España, el y tú más, es decir, yo lo hago mal, lo admito, pero tú lo haces peor, digamos, todos son iguales. Esta es un poco la idea que se transmite. Por tanto, yo creo que los incentivos, desde el punto de vista más obvio, que es el electoral, no sé si realmente existen o hasta el punto en que deberían existir. Por eso yo vuelvo un poco a lo que decía al principio. A mí me parece que una regulación sí puede establecer incentivos. Pongo siempre dos ejemplos muy claros, en eso no estoy muy de acuerdo con Elena, que la regulación ha conseguido cambios de cultura, que es lo que estamos buscando, ¿no? Cambios de cultura, en este caso de la integridad, que son los casos en España de la ley del tabaco. La gente dejó de fumar porque te sancionaban de una forma muy grave si, fumabas dentro de un espacio, digamos, no al aire libre o a los establecimientos, y el carnet de conducir por puntos, que pasamos a conducir como alemanes porque sencillamente con el carnet de conducir por puntos, si perdías los puntos podías ir a la cárcel. Por tanto, los incentivos funcionan y la regulación funciona. Lo que pasa es que hay que ser muy tajantes con los incentivos. Y aquí, entre las cosas que desde la sociedad civil hemos propuesto, hay uno muy claro. Es decir, los partidos políticos, por lo menos en España, viven de subvenciones públicas. Bueno, pues aquí hay un incentivo clarísimo a manejar, pero que nunca, lógicamente, los partidos políticos ponen encima de la mesa, que es, oiga, ustedes tienen una serie de incumplimientos de códigos de integridad, de códigos de conducta, de sus propios estatutos, esto tiene que pasar algo, ¿no? Claro, esto, como ya digo, es muy fácil y yo creo que cambiaría de la noche a la mañana la cultura de la integridad. ¿Esto qué pasa? Pues que hay un problema de agencia. Quien tiene que hacer esa regulación son los propios partidos políticos. Y habéis dicho también una cosa, ha dicho Luis, totalmente de acuerdo. Encima se tienen que que poner de acuerdo entre todos, porque claro, lo que digamos que un partido político vaya más allá o que incluso se someta a algún tipo, digamos, de autorregulación más estricta si no le supone ningún tipo de ventaja frente a los otros, esto no hay ningún incentivo. Y, por ejemplo, en el tema de las denuncias que habéis mencionado, algunas muy graves, por canales internos, ¿por qué no pasa nada? Porque se piensa que eso supone, al contrario, que vas a perder competitividad electoral. No que la vas a ganar, sino que la vas a perder, porque se va a percibir por el electorado que, bueno, pues que tienes a unas personas con conductas poco razonables y prefieres taparlo. Y esto es lo que ocurre. Y perdón que sea tan clara, pero es que llevo muchos años hablando de esto. Yo cuando hablo de incentivos digo, claro, los incentivos existen, se pueden poner. Otro caso muy claro, cuando se modifica la ley de partidos en España, un segundo, en el año 2002, se modifica para permitir la disolución de partidos políticos que de forma activa promovían el terrorismo. Esto pasa y, qué casualidad, cuando esta ley se aplica, resulta que ya no tenemos partidos políticos en España que promuevan acciones terroristas. Esto funciona. Lo que pasa que, claro, son incentivos, digamos, muy agresivos desde el punto de vista de los propios partidos políticos. Termino.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to reflect maybe that sometimes voters understand that you made an error and you want to apologize. And I think voters really don't like when you keep or not saying anything or just keep insisting you did not do anything wrong. We have seen this recently in the UK. There were 2 female politicians, both of which committed, well, minor integrity violations related to like registry and things like this. One quickly said, yes, it was a mistake, let me fix this. And she stayed. The other one kept insisting, no, 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 I was given the wrong advice, it's not me, and she had to resign because of the pressure that grew on. So I think also sometimes we need to understand that there is an incentive to be human and to acknowledge that we don't have to be perfect. I mean, I'm not a politician, never was and never will be, but that you as politicians, that you can make a mistake and acknowledge it quickly and fix it, and this will make it all go away. I think this is also an important thing to remember. And my next question is to Estefania. Dear Estefania, I think I would like to explore more your intergenerational aspect and take on integrity. In your book, Los Hijos de los Boomers, you argue that democracy is legitimized not only by its values, but its outcomes. It's very nice when elder people talk about good things and keep all the results for themselves. That doesn't really work, right? Because there is an intergenerational imbalance in terms of results. So do you think that the code of conduct could reshape this in one way or another? And do you think it would, if young people in Spain knew that the parties have code of conduct that would guarantee certain standards and certain maybe advancement, do you think it would work? 4 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think there are 2 main theories to explain the radicalization of young people. Some political scientists think, this is my school of mind, that it comes from the outcomes of the system, the standard of living, the possibility to be independent, to afford a life, to live your own life without the help of your parents. But other people think that it comes from the idea that human rights are at risk or the system itself is rotten. Okay, so there are 2 perspectives, the material one and the identity perspective. I think that the first one, and there are some evidences in Spain, is the more explicative to this phenomenon. Why? Because it has been proved that from the crisis in 2008, the support of democracy is being declined in Spain. So I think that if we, first of all, we take action in the material issues, we are more prone to solve the second problem, the identity problem. I do not deny the idea that some people perceive the system as rotten itself, as declining itself. But I think the first perspective is more important, because now some political cultures are being held in our democracy. For example, here in Spain, in the right parties, in the far right parties, they promote the idea that bipartidism is the same both parties are corrupt, both parties has the same flaws, but the point is that they are already changing the mind of our people towards our constitution, for example, or towards institutions itself. Now people think that, for example, the Senate is not necessary to represent territorial affairs. Some people think that the Congress itself has not the ability to make accountability towards the government. But in fact, the political culture is changing. And for example, now it's happening the same in the east of Europe, I think. The classical right has problems with the perspective of the rule of law. Now it's very common to accept the declining of the rule of law in our states, but not only from the far-right parties. In all the systems, parties from the center sometimes are trying to not to go to the Congress to explain some politics, are trying to avoid taking action when they have corruption cases, or for example, here in Spain there has been some cases related to alleged sexual abuse, and they delay the taking action, and it's not only until the media, and I will explain it afterwards, is on these scandals that they take action. So I think that it's a mix of things, but from my evidence, from the proven data, I think the material perspective is promoting the rest of the problem.
Thank you so much. We really want younger generation not to be using MDB. Do you know what it is? MDB, mom and dad bank. Yeah? There is actually, yeah, that's the best mortgage. No %. No need to give back. Of course, it's, I want my kids not to use this bank either, but it is a very, very difficult structural issue. My team also works on youth, and we do see very, very sad data about this. Independent living. Thank you so much. And I will turn now to Elena. Elena, I have a wonderful quote from you. Corruption is not fought only with transparency. The challenge is much greater. Genuine ethical behavior is needed from each of us. I love it because transparency exposes wrongdoing, but it's an integrity that prevents it. So you need to behave with integrity. And transparency is the second step. It's only when wrongdoing already happened. I wanted you to wear your TI hat for a second and to maybe tell us what do you think are the most effective mechanisms parties can adopt to prevent corruption internally. And if you want to talk also about behavior issues, but up to you. 4 minutes, please. Thank you.
Elisa, don't be angry at me. I really believe in regulation. Actually, I'm a constitutional law scholar. I did my PhD in constitutional law, so I really believe in what I meant before is that ethics codes are relevant, but if they are not full, maybe I just expressed it in a way that sounded that I am dismissal of regulation. But ethics codes are not enough, and you need a culture of, and I think that in this point we do agree, that you need more than that. You need a culture which actually links to the question that you're asking me. And this is something that we have not worked at Transparency International, to be honest. The Transparency International is more focused on transparency indicators and to what extent companies, political parties and the state comply with those. This is something that we are working more at Tosfera, at the foundation we co-founded, that's more specialized actually in ethics, in the actual ethics. And of all the different mechanisms that we have studied, we found ethical deliberation an interesting way. It's very idealistic, I know it is. Political parties are supposed to be very deliberative, and I think this is where we find another hurdle inside political parties, because power concentrates and doesn't have enough checks and balances inside to allow for a genuine deliberation that can boost this ethical or integrity attitudes that we are searching for. And so I don't know how we can introduce the idea of a free public ethical deliberation inside political parties, but it's a phenomenon that we need to recoup. When it comes to companies, for example, boards are also deliberative bodies, and the idea of introducing ethics and governance in those boards is increasing, especially when it comes to deciding things related to artificial intelligence and data. And so why don't we push for that sort of space within political parties, and find the mechanisms to counterbalance this concentration of power on just one person that doesn't allow, typically doesn't allow for these conversations to happen, which is, I think it's a real problem inside political parties right now.
Thank you so much. That's a great idea, to create a space where those topics will be regularly discussed and deliberated. Thank you so much. This kind of beautifully leads me to the next question for Luis, whom I wanted to ask how to combine the disciplinary part of integrity with the education, empowerment, or deliberative part. Intense periods like elections, pre, during, or post, because we know this is where most violations become visible. How do you go about those tense periods? Do you just, you don't want to just, use the stick. You also want to explain, but is this possible? Thank you. 4 minutes, Luis.
I mean, the research we have on voting, on electoral behavior, and we did some experimental stuff, so it's not just about possible links, it's actually causality. We noticed that voters still focus a lot on party ideological cues. Okay, that's a very easy way for them to guide their political behavior and to have a reference that if I want more state intervention or less state intervention in the economy, I know it's that party or that party. But the second issue is integrity. Now, how do they reconciliate both? Not easily. And that's what we often have in social psychology is a cognitive dissonance. So I have a scandal involving a party member of the party I appreciate, I vote for, I like, and that doesn't go down very well. It creates a conflict in my head. I hate corruption, I hate corrupt politicians, and it happened that the scandal just what has been reported has to do with a politician I had appreciation for. How do I solve this cognitive dissonance? And here where the problem begins, and there's the priority goes for the party identification. So it's a bit like for football clubs. You have the same kind of mentality. For church abuses, you have the same issue. There's a strong party identification. Then you kind of lower your standards. You say, okay, it happened, but, voting is also about other issues, about how they manage the economy, and are they competent in doing their job, and you kind of undervalue what has just been reported. And this is a way of solving the cognitive dissonance, okay? You lower the standard and you feel more comfortable. But obviously this is not the response.
Let's not promote this.
A long-term response. And as you said, there are strategic issues. And I understand that the incentives work with contexts where you feel that this can have repercussions on your electoral outcomes. Otherwise, you won't move forward. But when I said there has to be leadership commitment, because if there isn't, we won't move from this dilemma of collective action. Nobody moves forward. It's simple as that. So someone has to take the courage saying, okay, I have a progressive leadership in this party, and is looking for the problem is structural. We have young people are not trusting in us. They don't like our brand. They don't like parties. They think we're a bunch of people with no ethical principles. We want to change that. Unless you give this step forward, and we have several examples worldwide where this commitment, this leadership commitment to change, to break this dilemma of collective action have been successful. And it's not just during electoral moments, of course.
Yes,
It's in between elections, we have to do a lot of work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear Luis. And I also think polarization took this party loyalty even to more extreme, because when party loyalty is so important and you've been told the other party is complete bunch of demons and really, really, really bad people, there is no chance for you to swap your candidate who may have committed some unethical act for the other person who is so vilified because of the polarization. So this is why we keep sticking to whoever is being put forward. I mean, we as generic OSCE citizens, you know, let's choose our devil because he's ours. And we really need to break this mentality, because also it removes the pressure on politicians to behave, to be better. Yeah, because they also get those opinion polls and they see that no matter what, you just vote with your party, right, as a group. Thank you for putting this out there. And my next question would be to, to Elisa. Dear Elisa, so given your research on rule of law and institutional accountability, how can parties ensure that the codes of conduct are effectively communicated and are understood by ordinary members and not just leadership? Because this is such an abstract and vague concept. How can this be effective? 4 minutes, thank you.
Sí, bueno, yo por lo que he visto, que he estado mirando los códigos de conducta de los dos principales partidos, a ver, los códigos de conducta se entienden bastante bien. Lo que sí que creo que es interesante, y los dos además, digo, solo miran los dos, pero seguro que todos son parecidos, sí le dan importancia a las acciones de formación, ¿no? Yo sinceramente creo que no es tanto un problema de que, digamos, los afiliados de a pie no entiendan bien el código de conducta, sino que realmente se concrete qué tipo de actuaciones no están permitidas en el partido. Pero, de nuevo, pienso que no es tanto un problema de comprensión por los afiliados, sino de una cosa que ha dicho también Luis, importante, que yo hablaría del ejemplo de los líderes, ¿no? A mí me parece muy complicado en cualquier organización digamos que el afiliado de a pie o el cargo medio vaya a comportarse de forma diferente a cómo ve comportarse a los líderes. ¿Por qué digo esto? Porque, claro, los códigos de conducta, insisto, son bastante claros. Hasta el punto, no voy a decir el partido, pero dicen cosas como que no se debe, lo dice, pagar por favores sexuales, es decir, por prostitución. Esto lo he leído en el código de un partido político muy importante en España, es decir, que esto se entiende perfectamente, ¿no? Claro, si tú lo que luego ves es que hay líderes o personas importantes del partido que tienen ese tipo de conductas y no pasa nada, a mí me parece que digamos, es complicado que el resto de los afiliados o de los cargos lo vean así. Y yo creo que además hay una frase de Einstein que me gusta mucho, la decimos mucho los activistas, que no es que el ejemplo sea la mejor forma de, digamos, de explicar algo, es que es la única forma. Entonces, si tú puedes tener un código de conducta y 27 cursos de formación explicando qué es el tráfico de influencias, que no se deben hacer determinadas conductas, no recibir favores, no hay conflicto de intereses, pero claro, si tú luego en el día a día de tu partido lo que estás viendo es otro comportamiento, pues sinceramente. Sí quería incidir en otra cosa que ha dicho Luis también, que me parece muy importante, creo que lo menciona Elena también, es el tema de los órganos internos de control de estos códigos de conducta, ¿no? Que también lo he mencionado al principio. Un partido es exactamente igual que cualquier organización, tiene unas reglas y tiene que tener unos órganos que garantizan el cumplimiento de estas reglas. Y no hablo ya de la regulación de la que he mencionado antes. Si tú te das un código de conducta, pues ese código de conducta alguien tiene que velar porque se cumpla, ¿no? Son esos famosos órganos de garantía que, sin embargo, como vemos, y también lo hemos dicho muchas veces, siempre están formados por personas que dependen de los líderes del partido, es decir, que van a hacer exactamente lo que les diga. Esto no es creíble. Mencionaba también Luis antes el tema del officer, del finance, ¿no? El financial officer, es la misma idea. Tú necesitas contrapesos internos, pero claro, si las personas a las que nombran, que son personas que van a tener que hacer una tarea incómoda para el partido, los designas tú, pues ya sabes lo que va a pasar, ¿no? Entonces, esa idea que la hemos también señalado muchas veces desde mi fundación, de poner en esos órganos de contrapeso, expertos profesionales independientes que no le deban a los líderes del partido. Esto es una cosa que tampoco pasa nunca, pero es una idea que se pone, decir, hombre, usted lo que no puede es nombrar para estos cargos de contrapeso a una persona designada directamente por la Ejecutiva y cuya carrera política depende de la Ejecutiva, porque no va a funcionar, ¿no? Con esto termino.
Sorry, translation just catches up a bit slower. Thank you so much for reminding us that members of the party understand ethics and they know what ethics looks like, just like the voters. Thank you so much. Next question is for Estefania. Estefania, so can we please think, you are welcome to adopt, younger generation point of view or not, it's up to you, but how to have the ownership of the code without having, it being politicized, used for political gains, or is it just inevitable with any code of conduct that there will be at least one instance where it is used as a political weapon? Thank you. 4 minutes.
Well, I think that political parties in Spain have a big problem because disciplinary mechanisms already exist. Codes of behavior do already exist. Yes. The problem, they have to put them in action. And it has been the problem in both main parties, and I imagine that in the others, in the last times. For example, there was a debate some years ago that when someone is facing a trial, someone from the party, should this person be, should he step out? Should this person leave the party? And in some cases, we had problems because some of them were innocent. The justice do not condemn them. So what do you do in this case? Do we should wait until the person, the trial has passed? Do we should until the justice has condemned this person? So it's difficult because obviously the public opinion wants the person to leave the party, wants the person to leave the church they are in, but sometimes this person could be innocent, so this is a main problem. Secondly, for example, do we already have in some left parties codes of behavior that don't allow to consume prostitution, but some deputies in Spain have done that. So what do you do if the behavior is already established in this sense and those people do that? Do this person, should this person leave the seat? Sometimes it's strange. And it's not only until they are involved in more problematic situations like corruption that they leave the church. Even in these cases, I have already said that they don't leave the church. So I think for parties it's difficult because it's harmful from the eyes of the public opinion, but sometimes it's difficult to take action from the party. Or, for example, I was saying before that not until the media contributes to the public scandal, they take action. For example, in Spain, there was a party that had in the lists people who had committed violent crimes, in Spain, from the terrorism and so on. Not only the newspapers contribute to the scandal, those people leave the list. So sometimes I think that media should be more sharp in these issues. We should be on the topics because in general these codes of behavior do already exist. But the point is that if the party do not appreciate a harm for the interest, from the electoral interest, they do not take action.
Thank you so much. And my last question today will be to Elena. And how do you think, dear Elena, do you think codes of conduct actually can be a good tool to create a safe environment for underrepresented groups? Because very often those are the groups who are excluded from the main group. Yeah, male, able, dominant religion and so on and so forth. So do you think a code of conduct could be also a way to attract this kind of members, candidates, politicians? And what are common challenges in implementing those protections or measures?
Yeah. Yes, and this is the last question of this round?
I think so, because I think we kind of started late, and we do have... So
I would like to, if it's my last intervention, I would like just to answer to the questions more directly. I think, yes, but with the guarantees that my colleagues have already expressed, the idea of not just to be a norm, but to be specific internal mechanisms to make the norm enforceable and to make the norm a reality, which is, I think, the main difficulty, right? To have someone as a compliance officer in the world of companies, have that person inside political parties to be able to... But I think that it's very relevant. One of the questions that we were also having on the agenda, which is the role of civil society organizations in boosting. And I would like to just share one experiment that we have conducted with the media. And as an independent organization, we have managed to gather media from different ideological environments and to agree on a set of standards, a set of codes that they're going to self-implement. And the role of our organization has been crucial in the sense that we are a third party, we are neutral, we are going to be supervising and following the extent to which these media organizations comply with those codes, and we use rankings. And I was thinking to myself, why don't we start using these kind of mechanisms to rank political parties according to the level of compliance to certain codes and make them accountable in that reputational sense to the public. I mean, imagine this year El PP has been positioned as the second best party in terms of whatever. I think those kinds of mechanisms work, rankings work, and as far as I know, and Elisa and Estefania, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no specific initiative in Spain that does this. Rank political parties according to the level of compliance to...
I have not heard anywhere in OSCE, not just in Spain. I think the only ranks we have in terms of popularity when the elections are coming, and that's it.
But don't you think, do you think this would work?
I think it can be very interesting, and of course methodology would be the first thing everyone would think about. How do you assess? But I think, wow, if you do this, you'll be the keynote speaker in our boot camp next year. Yes, and headlining UNCAC state party meeting. It's a wonderful idea, Elena.
We have done it in the media sector.
Yes, so you already have experience with a very...
And with the codes, and again, what we do is assess to which extent the organizations comply with the codes year on year.
The issue is that media is very public. What they write is visible, but political parties...
No, but the code has nothing to do with what they write, has to do with the way they organize themselves in terms of ethics and integrity.
So they all agreed to participate.
They did. It's a self-regulation initiative that it's monitored and supervised with external civil society organizations.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah. Well done.
If I can add something about that, I think it's a great idea, but I think we have to be very careful with the methodology because I agree it's a very big leap between what you are doing now and political parties. And in terms of transparency, I don't think it would be so easy to know what they are actually doing. But maybe you could, well, something is...
But for example, sorry to interrupt, Elisa, you alongside España Mejor have done a fantastic work in designing an ethics code for... So
you could use that as a standard,
yes,
maybe?
Yeah, we could use that as a standard and then analyze year by year which political party is complying better with that ethics code.
I think we could do that. That's an idea.
I mean, I think it really
at
works.
The national
Actually,
level, at the national
Transparency International does it as a state level, how the rankings, how they work. And my experience is that rankings is an effective tool because of the reputation incentive.
Definitely, this is why we don't have any ranking. We are not allowed to do any ranking. I mean, we see ODIHR, we don't rank our states or parties. But if someone else does, we will definitely reference this.
Luis wanted to say
yeah,
something.
but it's just on the compliance, you're looking at performance. So you need, you're going beyond the design of the instrument. The design of the instrument that we do already. In fact, we had a presentation this morning, and we follow the same, we have this now being mapped beyond Europe on this party ethics self-regulation project, and we look at the design. So you're measuring robustness of the design, not the practice. Okay, not whether it works or not within the party. That you can compare. Definitely you can compare that. We're not doing rankings. We're not interested in rankings. But I can understand your point of the impact it has, because we've done that for municipalities in Portugal, and it definitely had an impact. But for parties, we just look at design, no practice. When you get to practice, what kind of indicators are you going to collect? You need the parties to provide these indicators. How many decisions have been taken, how many cases have been brought forward, etc. We try to do this through interviews. We're really open for them to involve us and talk about the practice, especially those that have had codes of conduct for the last 5-10 years.
Thank you so much. I think this idea can definitely be developed further. And thank you for putting this forward. I think it's a great outcome of today's discussion. I wanted to ask you, since due to the time constraints, I had to remove the last round of questions, and I'm sorry about this because colleagues were preparing to answer them. I wanted to give a possibility to each of you for 1 minute if there is something you wanted to say, but you didn't have a possibility. So dear panelists, this is the moment. Is there anyone would like to say? I think no.
They're already discussing the ranking.
Yes, they're already writing the project proposal and contacting people across the Spanish-Portuguese border, joint collaboration of regions. I think there was a question from the audience. Fernando, please.
Well, not so much a question, but a comment. I mean, Luis is very humble, and he doesn't want to tell us that he conducted an experiment in Portugal in Spain, where he was showing that exactly so political parties benefit even electorally of this type of transparency. So those rankings could have important, even practical consequences for the results of the elections. I also agree with Elisa that the question is we need to have a very careful design methodology. Just to avoid, for example, you were mentioning Transparency International, yes, excellent ranking, but people think that, they are measuring corruption. No, they are measuring perceptions of corruption. So I think these are things that, need to be important, and also to avoid, for example, the last rankings that we could see, where, for example, Portugal is less democratic than Spain, like the economies and other indexes, right? Which have been, extremely controversial. And of course, everything depends on the methodology that you choose, And then the final comment is that, yes, this kind of, naming and shaming is very, very useful, but without a proper, state institution that does the control. Because, let's be honest, and let's talk, if this is Spain, Tribunal de Cuentas is really useless in terms of controlling funding of political parties. Sorry about that, but, I mean, you cannot release reports, 5 years, with 5 years delay, right? So it's important that all these, initiatives are combined if we really want to have, a positive outcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fernando. We'll take all of those comments on board, and since Elena, if you will be measuring it with Elisa and Luis and Fernando, you'll be measuring, of course, something very ephemeral, which is ethics and compliance with ethics. So of course there will be controversies. You know that. So, but that's part of the game. And if there are no questions from the audience, I think we can probably conclude. And I'm really sorry it happened so that I'm also the one who is closing. Do you have also closing remarks? Very short, please. Could you please join me? Yes. And please. And I would appreciate if our host would start first.
So again, thank you for the invitation. As I said before, I think it's we are in the Senate of Spain, so I think it's better if I speak in Spanish. I can do a sort of mixture, but I think I prefer to go through Spanish. And I had some notes, but I think I'm going to improvise a little bit, and I'm going to try to answer to all of you. And the first thing that I want to say, it's the first thing that Luis mentioned, that it's about democracy. It's all about democracy. This is my first point. As the President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, we have 57 members, more than 323 parliamentarians, and from totally different environments. And my first point would be, yes, it's about democracy. And I was in Ukraine 2 weeks ago with President Zelensky, and also with the chairman of the Ukrainian Rada, and I think he expresses very well what is going on. I think there is not a decline of democracy. It's a fight about the future of democracy, and it's a sort of metaphor, but what is going on in Ukraine, it's a good exercise, and Ruslan Stefanchuk is also mentioning this. We are in a sort of fight, authoritarianism versus democracy. This is the first thing. The second thing, yes, there is a narrative against democracy. There is a huge narrative against democracy. And you were talking about reality and perception. When I was coordinating the last US elections, the spin doctors of the Republican Party, they were saying, perception is reality today. And the second point that they were telling to the 130 or 40 observers is, make people angry, and these people will be extremely mobilized. So this is a little bit the narrative. Third point that I would like to raise, I think you did not raise it, because when you are in Mongolia, or you are in Kazakhstan, or you are in Azerbaijan, or you are in Germany, the idea of double standards. Double standards. There are a lot of countries out there, a lot of parliamentarians out there that they don't understand why we are so focused in Ukraine and we have forgotten Gaza. And these double standards don't help to increase the level of perception of the citizens. The third point, you said about companies and democracy. Yes. In the US elections, we're having a discussion, I hope this is a Chatham House discussion, in which, for the first time, we were really shocked by the level of amendment of the level of amendment of the company system, technological system, and political system. And it was, I heard for the first time in the US, telling, maybe we should regulate this. We are going too far. Another thing about media. I'm coming from the media. In 1992, I was working for the Spanish newspaper El País. It shows I'm very old. For a long time ago, we were speaking about mass media. Today, we are not talking about media. We are talking about individual public opinion. So today, you are not all in the media. The media is somewhere else. It's in us, in every one of us. Would like to end with two more things. The idea of comparing. I appreciate the idea of this ranking, but I think as OSCE president, we try not to compare. We don't try to compare. And the last US elections, it's very interesting because Sunday we had these Hungarian elections, and we had a huge conversation in Washington with the head of mission of ODIHR and myself, because the head of mission of ODIHR was comparing the US democracy with another democracy. And I said, you don't compare. We are talking about the US elections, only about the US elections. Don't compare with another country. Don't compare it. The last thing that I would like to say about parties, because in the end I was an MP in 2016, and I don't want to talk about me, but I was sanctioned because I did not vote in the sense of the party in the investiture of 2016. I was one of the 14 parliamentarians who was sanctioned. 600 euros, I still remember that. Wow. So, and then what, just because I want to be positive about the free public political deliberation, I would like to say that as a politician, and I'm a member of the board, I've been member of the national board in the Socialist Party. I still think that there is much more debate than people think. Yes. There's much more debate. The problem is that, again, and I will end, the perception is reality. And I will end with something that Stefania said, is that in the end, she said, judiciary is under attack, media is under attack, political parties have to take action. My point of view is not only the political parties have to take action. There is a huge debate, it's a bigger debate that has to be undergone. So it's not only about the political party. So I would like to thank you again, Julia. We have working together in the last years, and you were in Hungary as well. And we also mentioned gender. I would like to close with this. I think one of the major topics that we are witnessing today is how women are sidelined in every election. And in every context in which we are observing, we see how women are less and less present. And this is something important. And I will end with my recent visit to Georgia, because you are there. In our last visit to Georgia 1 month ago, and this is because it's about democracy, as we said, the Prime Minister of Georgia told me, when the Ukrainian war started, things changed, but with the arrival of Trump, things accelerated. So now we feel much better in this context. So this is what the Vice President was saying in the beginning. With this context, maybe democracy is more at risk than before. Thank you very much, Julia, and thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, I will also close on behalf of OSCE ODIHR. And I think as we are coming to the close of today's briefing, I would like first of all to express appreciation to all of you for participating, and express, of course, gratitude to our host, to the Spanish Senate, who was represented today this morning by Vice Speaker Javier Maroto. Thank you very much equally to you, to the Presidents of OSCE Assembly. Thank you very much for your presence, active participation. I would like to thank our panelists. I think it was a great discussion. I think we will be having more of this, and I think we will engage all of you in the different panels as well. So thank you to Elena, Luis, Elisa, and Estefania. I think your insights really greatly enriched today's discussion and have provided valuable perspectives on what are the issues today in Spain, but also broadly, and what can be done to address them. I think this project that is emerging is wonderful. And yeah, we all understand that if men and women were angels, no ethics frameworks would be necessary. But because we are not, integrity must be designed and enforced. And thank you very much also for reminding about the increase of gendered barriers that women face in current politics. Today's exchanges also demonstrated that fostering a culture of integrity within political parties is both a shared challenge and a shared responsibility. It is also a movement that is emerging across all OSCE space. Parties are more and more picking this up. And we understand that code of conduct, when it is meaningfully developed, which is with participation of as many stakeholders inside as possible, and implemented robustly, can serve not only as a disciplinary tool, but as an instrument for building trust, promoting inclusivity, and strengthening democratic resilience. ODIHR remains committed to supporting participating states, including Spain, in advancing those efforts. We stand ready to continue working with parliamentary political parties and other stakeholders to further develop and strengthen integrity frameworks in practice. Thank you very much for your engagement. I also would like to thank very much the translators who have done an excellent job. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry if we spoke too quickly at times. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you for your presence. We look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you so much and have a lovely day. Thank you.